Chapter 510. Would Lei Zhanqian be willing to accept defeat at the final juncture of the Void Continent world? Given Lei Zhanqian's strength, would he have been able to sense that the sword move could not be repeated? Although he had personally eliminated Lei Zhanqian, Jiang Wang still respected Lei Zhanqian's combat strength enough. He had deliberately waited for the others to leave first so that they could distract Lei Zhanqian. At the same time, he wanted to give Lei Zhanqian some time to calm down and prevent him from doing anything too emotional. Li Fengyao, of course, had seen through it. Moreover, she approved of Jiang Wang's cleverness, so she had deliberately stopped to chat with Jiang Wang. She was not a person who liked to chat. Jiang Wuxie, on the other hand, was either pretending to not understand or simply trying to interrupt Jiang Wang and Li Fengyao's conversation. In any case, it was a little annoying. After the others had left, Jiang Wang walked toward the Stargate with his sword in hand. Li Fengyao moved at the same time, and Jiang Wuxie hurriedly followed. Those who left the Seven-Star Pavilion's secret realm first would be ranked as low as possible. For example, there were still 40 people fighting in the Seven-Star Pavilion's secret realm, so the person who left first would be ranked 41st. After that, many people would not be able to return to the Seven-Star Valley alive. After the Dubhe world ended, the Seven-Star realm had closed completely. Now that the rankings were out, it did not matter who left first. When he stepped out of the Stargate, he was already in the Seven-Star Valley. This place did not seem to have changed since he left. The night sky was still high, and the 7 stars were still hanging in the sky. Everyone stood with their heads held high. They all knew that the young man who had appeared at the Heavenly Leader star position was the winner of the 7-Star Pavilion's secret realm this time. He had suppressed Lei Zhanqian, Li Fengyao, Jiang Wuxie, Fang Chong, and other experts and taken first place. Compared to the obscure person he had been before entering the 7-Star Pavilion's secret realm, Jiang Wang could be said to be the center of attention now. The results he had achieved made everyone need to re-evaluate their understanding of him. His success in the Tianfu mystic realm allowed him to enter the eyes of the Qi people for the first time, and his victory in the Yang territory battlefield allowed him to stand out. Being the champion of the 7-Star Pavilion's secret realm this time was enough to make him one of the most eye-catching powerhouses among the younger generation in Qi. Because this time, he had obtained first place by competing against people like Lei Zhanqian, Li Fengyao, Jiang Wuxie, and Fang Chong. The more terrifying Lei Zhanqian was, the more powerful Li Fengyao and Jiang Wuxie were, the more weight this first place carried. Jiang Wang even noticed the look in Tian Chang's eyes. That kind of vigilance and seriousness disappeared in a flash and instantly turned into full admiration. Perhaps when he returned to the 7 Stars Valley and found that Jiang Wang had not returned, he had hoped that Jiang Wang had died in the 7 Stars Valley so that no one would know of his weakness. However, Jiang Wang actually went to the Dubhe world to compete, and even won first place in the secret realm of the 7-Star Pavilion. No matter how many thoughts he had, he could only suppress them. He stood not far behind Tian Chang. His expression was wooden, and his surprise at Jiang Wang winning first place was also very superficial. Anyone would think that this was an honest person who was not good with words and not good at acting. Jiang Wang and him did not even make eye contact, because Tian Chang was a smart person. Under the various gazes of surprise and admiration, only one person walked out of the crowd and strode over. Jiang Wang instantly retracted his gaze and his footsteps stopped. His hand was still on his sword and did not relax. Lei Zhanqian walked out of the crowd and walked in front of Jiang Wang. He glanced at his hand on the sword and shook his head. I did not expect that Zhonggenjia actually had such a secret technique in the 7 Stars Valley, and did not hesitate to give it to you. Fang Chong's gaze changed immediately. In the eyes of those who had experienced the scene back then, Lei Zhanqian's words made it clear that Jiang Wang's sword move was not his own strength. Lei Zhanxian speculated that the Zhonggenjia's exploration of the Seven-Star Pavilion's secret realm should be ahead of the other factions, just like how he was able to enter the Dubhe world half a step ahead. Jiang Wang had no intention of correcting his misunderstanding. He only said, "So?" Lei Zhanxian had not expected this person to be so arrogant even after leaving the Void Continent and losing that sword move. As the most popular contender for first place in the Seven-Star Pavilion's secret realm, the entire Seven Stars Valley was shocked when the 13th star came out. All kinds of complicated looks were on their faces. Even he himself could not believe it. He had fought 1 against 3, intending to suppress all of his opponents with his overwhelming strength and obtain the undisputed first place. In the end, however, Jiang Wang had appeared out of nowhere and defeated him with a single strike. If he hadn't used the Lei family's exploration results to escape from the Void Continent, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Yes, it was escape. It was such a humiliating word. He said nothing after returning to the Seven Stars Valley, but he had replayed that sword move countless times in his mind. In the end, he came to the conclusion that it was impossible for that sword move to appear in the soaring dragon realm. Although there were no limits in the world of cultivation, generation after generation of improvement would eventually push the limits of each realm forward. However, there was a process to this as well. Wang Yiwu had pushed the limits of the Ascension realm forward by a large margin. His name was engraved in the history of the cultivation world, and he had become the Tianjiao that attracted worldwide attention. If Jiang Wang's sword move had been of conventional strength, then he had practically completed an extreme long jump. How was this possible? Either Jiang Wang had long since surpassed the soaring dragon realm and had been hiding his cultivation base all this time, or he had borrowed external strength for that sword move. Considering that he was the last to enter the game of life and death, it was not hard to speculate that it was because he had to make some preparations. Losing to a sword move that he had schemed for a long time and was very difficult to replicate didn't seem so hard to accept. However, the problem was that the others didn't know. Those who didn't know would think that Lei Zhanxian had an undeserved reputation. He had originally wanted to defeat Li Fengyao, Jiang Wuxie, and Fang Chong in a 1-on-3 battle and eliminate the 3 strongest opponents directly to boost his reputation. He could have done it indeed. However, he hadn't expected that he would become a stepping stone and use his own reputation to boost Jiang Wang's reputation. Reputation was very important, especially for the heir of a big family like him. The benefits involved were not limited to himself. If he wanted to redeem his reputation, the only thing he could do was to defeat Jiang Wang in public. He would use his true strength to prove himself. He would prove that his failure in the Voidland world was just a trick. In this way, although Jiang Wang could still use his reputation to climb up, he wouldn't be trampled too badly. Therefore, Lei Zhanxian had deliberately waited in the Seven Stars Valley and refused to leave. He had waited for Jiang Wang to return before showing up. He wanted to explain the truth of his failure to the audience, and at the same time provoke a fight to save his reputation. He had indeed come out with the intention of provoking. However, he hadn't even started yet, and this kid was already so cold and arrogant. What was going on? He had already been seen through, yet he was still bluffing. These were all unscrupulous methods. Lei Zhanxian only found it laughable. You won only because you used a trick. He looked at Jiang Wang and shook his head with a contemptuous smile. Do you really think that you're worthy of winning? Jiang Wang naturally knew what Lei Zhanxian was thinking. He had chosen to return to the Seven Stars Valley after the others as a form of precaution. However, he hadn't appeared at the Heavenly Leader's star immediately, which had given Lei Zhanxian enough time to calm down. However, Lei Zhanxian had still made this choice. Since he was going to be provoked no matter what, there was no need to give face. People who really wanted to slap you wouldn't go easy on you just because you sent your face over. This was why he was so arrogant in front of Lei Zhanqian. Whether I'm worthy or not, I've already won. Jiang Wang looked back at Lei Zhanqian indifferently. What about you, Lei Zhanqian? Chapter 511. Lei Zhanqian had always given people the impression that he was heroic, mighty, and insufferably arrogant. But at this moment, his rather dignified face instantly turned the color of pig liver. Lei Zhanqian dominated the universe and was number one in everything. He didn't run away first. He could totally imagine how many people would laugh at him once the nickname, Lei Zhanqian, got out. But it was a fact that he ran away from the floating continent world. Li Fengyao, Jiang Wuxie, and Fang Chong had all witnessed it with their own eyes. Apart from Fang Chong, he couldn't silence any of them. And it went without saying that Jiang Wuxie would work hard to promote this nickname for him. Lei Zhanqian's hair seemed to be about to explode. He was unable to restrain his anger. You're just a soaring dragon realm cultivator. You think you can take advantage of a Zhanggenjia's lowly means and act so arrogantly? Before his anger, he was more in disbelief. He even began to doubt his own judgment. Where did this kid get his confidence from? Jiang Wang sneered. You should be glad that I'm not in the inner house. Otherwise, do you think you can run away? In other words, when he reached the inner house, Lei Zhanqian wouldn't even have a chance to be his opponent. Of course, this was just a threat. But Jiang Wang did have the confidence to confront him. He wasn't bluffing at all. With his experience in the Seven Stars Pavilion's secret realm, he could already see through the fog of ignorance and reach the soaring dragon realm at any time. The reason why he hadn't knocked on the inner house and become an inner house cultivator with a divine power was because he was waiting for the perfect moment. It was good enough now, but not the best. He had regrets in the Ascension realm, and he didn't want to have any more regrets in the soaring dragon realm. But if Lei Zhanqian insisted on fighting, he could only take off the divine power in advance and give up on the perfect plan. In terms of combat strength, he didn't fear Lei Zhanqian at all. If Lei Zhanqian had left a regret in the soaring dragon realm today, then he would definitely make Lei Zhanqian pay a heavy price for this regret. Looks like you really want to die. Lei Zhanqian obviously couldn't back down now. He took a big step forward, intending to directly attack. A cold and arrogant figure stepped out from the Big Dipper star position. You'd better think about it. His tyrannical aura was not concealed at all, and his attitude of supporting Jiang Wang was also very clear. Li Fengyao. Lei Zhanqian's eyes were filled with anger. Li Fengyao, do you really want to be my enemy? Li Fengyao's voice was as cold and arrogant as his expression. So what? Li Longchuan got along with Jiang Wang with the attitude of making friends. For the sake of her brother, she would not leave Jiang Wang alone. And from her own heart was she, Li Fengyao, someone who could be threatened? Very good. Lei Zhanqian entangled with lightning in front of him, and the manifestation of a divine ability faintly took shape. Li Fengyao gripped the frostkill bow and placed her jade fingers on the bowstring. Jiang Wang gripped his sword without saying anything. The Dao-veined soaring dragon had already risen from the isolated island of heaven and earth, ready to knock on the inner palace at any time. Just as swords were drawn and bows were about to be triggered at any moment. Clatter, clatter. The sound of chains dragging on the ground came from afar. This sound seemed to be very far away, but also very close. It was very far away because when it reached the ear, it was somewhat indistinct and unreal. It was very close because it reached the ear so easily, even close to the heart, causing people to feel a kind of distress and exhaustion from the sound. The great Tao is like the blue sky, I alone cannot reach it. This sound did not do anything, but it caused the confrontation to remain a confrontation, and only a confrontation. The two sides of the confrontation seemed to have frozen, and no one made the first move to break the confrontation. A barefoot man wearing only thin silk clothes, with shackles on his hands and feet, and long chains dragging on the ground, appeared in everyone's line of sight. When he walked over, everyone was very silent. Because he was Tian Anping. No one could make him a prisoner. Therefore, his shackles were of course the restraints he gave himself. Tian Anping dragged the chains forward and walked in front of the people in the confrontation. He did not look at anyone in the confrontation, but raised his head and looked at the sky for a while, as if he was thinking about something. However, since he was silent, the others could only remain silent. After a while, Tian Anping retracted his gaze with a puzzled expression, as if he really did not understand. I remember that the rules of the Seven Stars Valley were announced hundreds of years ago. After the Seven Stars Valley's mystic realm ended, no matter what kind of grudges the participants had in the mystic realm, they were not allowed to settle in the Tian family's territory. Fighting was not allowed in the Seven Stars Valley. This was because no matter the outcome of the battle, who lived and who died, who won and who lost, the Tian family could not shirk the responsibility in the end. Therefore, the Tian family had the need to continue this rule, and they also had the ability to do so. This rule had been passed down for hundreds of years. As an outer building cultivator, Tian Huanzhang also had enough weight to oversee the Seven Stars Valley. However, weight was only relative. For a genius with a prominent family like Lei Zhanqian, if he was angry, he would not care about Tian Huanzhang at all. However, at this moment Tian Anping came over. Tian Huanzhang did not need to care because no matter how powerful he was, no matter how much Lei Zhanqian violated the rules, as long as he did not wantonly slaughter the Tian family members in front of him, he could not really do anything to Lei Zhanqian. At most, he would be expelled. However, the person who came was Tian Anping. Everyone in the Qi family basically recognized that Tian Anping's wisdom was at the top level. Such a person should know how to take the big picture into consideration. However, Tian Anping and his wisdom were equally famous for his craziness. No one could be sure of what he would do. Wisdom and craziness, these two contradictory characteristics, coexisted in him. No one could be sure which kind of Tian Anping they encountered. Of course, his question should be answered by Lei Zhanqian. This was because Lei Zhanqian was the one who wanted to start a fight. However, Lei Zhanqian was not willing to answer. He had just been ridiculed by Jiang Wang as "Thunder runs first," and had just aggressively wanted to get back at him. He could not admit defeat as soon as Tian Anping came out, right? However, if he really did go against Tian Anping, he was indeed a bit afraid. On one hand, he was not as strong as Tian Anping, on the other hand, he did not know if the other would go crazy. Li Fengyao spoke at this time. She ignored Tian Anping and said directly to Lei Zhanqian, "After you left the Dubhe world, I did not kill that woman. You ought to know how I am. If I control my temper, can you control your temper?" Lei Zhanqian loosened his fist, and the lightning seal disappeared silently. Although he had protected Qi Leiyan in the life and death chess game, it was more to protect his own face. It was not a big deal to kill a woman who he had not known for long. He would not risk his life to fight Li Fengyao for Qi Leiyan. However, at this moment, he needed this way out. Very much. "Li Fengyao, of course, is worthy of my temper," he said. Then he took a deep look at Jiang Wang and turned to leave. From the beginning to the end, he and Li Fengyao seemed to ignore Tian Anping. However, from the beginning to the end, they were all afraid of Tian Anping. Logically speaking, Lei Zhanqian was the one who wanted to challenge the rules of Seven Stars Valley. Li Fengyao did not have to worry that he and Jiang Wang would be targeted. However, how to say it, Tian Anping was worrying because you did not know what logic he followed. The person who provoked him was Lei Zhanqian, but if he suddenly wanted to kill Li Fengyao or Jiang Wang, it would be very in line with his style. As for the crazy revenge of the Li family of Stone Gate after killing Li Fengyao, Tian Anping would not consider it at all when he was crazy. It was not that he had not killed the legitimate son of a famous family. The Tian family suffered a heavy blow because of this, and this history was not long ago. Many people still remembered it. His madness was thus named, and many Tian family members still regarded him as a scourge because of this reason. Chapter 5:12. Lei Zhanqian left the Seven Stars Valley arrogantly. With Tian Anping around, he would not be able to regain his dignity. In fact, since Li Fengyao had made it clear that he would support Jiang Wang, the gains and losses of starting a fight had to be reconsidered. With Tian Anping's help, it was not shameful to respect the rules of the Seven Stars Valley. Everyone could understand. After all, compared to Tian Anping, he was the one who respected the big picture. But in the end, it was just self-comfort. He was still not strong enough. If he could withstand Jiang Wang's sword, he would not have the chance to be mocked. If he could be stronger than Tian Anping, he would not have left with his tail between his legs. He was already very strong, but it was far from enough. His subordinates were guarding outside the Seven Stars Valley. Originally, they were ready to welcome his triumphant return. Now, they could only remove those fancy things to avoid angering young Master Lei. Lei Zhanqian sat in the carriage with an unpleasant expression. "I want Jiang Wang's information, all of it." He closed his eyes, as if trying to suppress all his anger. Then, he ordered, "Also send someone to check the name Zhang Linchuan. See if there is such a person." When the life and death game started, the Qinghua division, which had an extraterrestrial team, naturally attracted the attention of other competitors. But the name Zhang Linchuan was really unfamiliar, so it was ignored by many people. Now, of course, they knew that it was Jiang Wang's alias. Jiang Wang used this name before. If it's just an alias, how long will it take to check this name? Where did it appear? If there is such a person, Jiang Wang will definitely know him. On the other hand, that person should know Jiang Wang's past very well. Based on this clue, if you can find the person, bring him to me directly. His subordinates obeyed, and the carriage drove steadily into the distance. In the Seven Stars Valley, Tian Anping did not stop Lei Zhanqian from leaving. He just stood there, as if he was thinking about something. In fact, Tian Huanzhang, who was in charge of guarding the Seven Stars Valley, was also very confused about Tian Anping's arrival. Upholding the rules and protecting the honor of the family was not something that Tian Anping would do. Don't talk about the big picture. If Tian Anping had the so-called big picture, he would not have intercepted the power of the Seven Stars' mysterious realm without knowing who was there, which almost made the Tian family become enemies with half of the Qi division. He did not even give an explanation after the incident. As the person in charge of the Seven-Star Mystic Realm this time, Tian Huanzhang naturally had resentment in his heart. One had to know that there weren't many benefits to being in charge of something like this. Once there was a problem, everyone would come looking for him. When it was time to take responsibility, who would be willing to hand Tian Anping over? As for the battle between the Lei family, the Li family, and the Zhanggenjia, he planned to wait until the battle was almost over before he stepped in to maintain order. Of course, they couldn't watch either Lei Zhanqian or Li Fengyao die in the Seven Stars Valley, but watching them deepen their hatred might not be a bad thing for the Tian family. Tian Huanzhang felt that he was far-sighted. Of course, he was very dissatisfied with Tian Anping's short-sightedness. He flew down the valley and landed in front of Tian Anping. "Anping, why are you here?" But his voice was extremely kind and gentle. It was the complete opposite of his inner emotions. Previously, when the power of the Seven Stars was intercepted and he asked someone to pass on the message, he still dared to take advantage of his seniority and questioned him sternly. Now that they were standing face to face, he couldn't help but show a rare kindness in his life. Although his heart was full of resentment, Tian Anping did not respond. He only looked around at the cultivators in the valley with slight confusion. "Why aren't you leaving?" he asked. "Are you planning to stay for dinner?" No, young Master Tian, you're too polite. Goodbye, goodbye. Most people did not leave because Tian Anping had not said that they could leave. They did not know if they should leave or if they would anger this person if they left directly. A few people, like Jiang Wuxie and Li Fengyao, who were fearless, wanted to take the opportunity to observe Tian Anping. After all, this person had always been famous, but he rarely appeared in front of others. Because of that incident, he had been forbidden from leaving the Great Glade County. But even in the city, very few people could see him. They only knew that he was imprisoned in the auxiliary guard building all year round, and no one knew what he was doing. But no matter what kind of mentality they had, since Tian Anping had already said this, then no one would stay behind. Who would want to have dinner with Tian Anping? No matter how delicious the Tian family's food was, it was not worth risking one's life to try it. Soon, all the cultivators dispersed. Jiang Wang guessed that Tian Anping's appearance might be related to the failure of the Tian clan's team on planet Yin. But of course, he would not show any abnormalities. He did not even glance at Tian Chang and Tian He. If he wanted to play the game of telepathy under the nose of a person like Tian Anping, he would be afraid that he would not be exposed quickly enough and die quickly enough. He naturally left with Li Fengyao. Xiaotong and Chu He were still waiting at the inn. However, for some reason, Jiang Wuxie also eagerly followed their footstep. She was practically following them like a shadow. Truly shameless, Jiang Wang thought to himself. After the outsiders left, Tian Anping shifted his gaze and looked at Tian Chang. Plop! Tian Chang directly knelt on the ground without any hesitation. He did not have any misgivings about his dignity. This trip to the secret realm failed. Tian Chang is duty-bound. Tian Anping's expression was somewhat curious as he slowly said, "After leaving Seven Stars World, the first thing you did was not to report to the assistant pavilion. Instead, you hid in Seven Stars Valley and searched for connections everywhere. Why? Do you think that there is anyone in the Tian family who can protect you?" "Young Master Ping, I have no such intention. It's just that I escaped from planet Yin with serious injuries. I had no choice but to stop and recuperate first." As he spoke, he untied his outer clothes. Bandages wrapped around his chest and abdomen. They were already soaked in blood. He looked as though he had been fished out of blood. "If you don't believe me, you can examine my injuries." "Sai, what are you doing?" Tian Huanzhang could not help but say, "There is no such thing as a 100% success rate in this world. There is always the possibility of failure. You can talk about what you encountered and what you experienced. You should be able to figure out which responsibilities you should bear and which ones you shouldn't. Our Tian family does not have a reason to punish our clansmen indiscriminately." "Granduncle." Tian Anping's voice was heavy. Of course, Tian Huanzhang was not his biological granduncle. However, according to seniority, there was no problem in calling him that. It could be seen that he was almost moved to tears. However, he was forcefully suppressing his emotions. From his voice to his expression, every detail was in line with the image of a loyal and responsible man. He began to narrate with grief. "After we entered Seven Stars World, according to young Master Ping's instructions, Walala." Tian Anping raised his hand and moved the shackles, making a noise. He indicated for Tian Chang to shut up. "You are a truly intelligent person," Tian Anping said, "therefore I will not examine your injuries. I will not listen to your explanation." This was because Tian Chang was a truly intelligent person. Therefore, no matter how much responsibility he had to bear, he would definitely be able to extricate himself from it. Moreover, he would definitely be able to do it flawlessly. Tian Anping did not need to listen to Tian Chang's explanation to know that there would be no problems. In other words, if Tian Chang could not confirm that there were no flaws in his explanation, he would have already defected. He would not stay in Seven Stars Valley and wait for Tian Anping to come knocking on his door. You will go to Lost Heart Valley with those who are still alive. The others will go for 3 days. You will go for 1 month, Tian Anping said calmly. His response was also very simple. Since he could not confirm Tian Chang's responsibility, he would let him bear it all. Tian Chang's face instantly paled. Chapter 513. Heartbreak Valley was a place where the Tian family punished sinners. It could even be said that it was a place where people were tortured to death. If one could come out alive after the time was up, their punishment would be offset. However, very few people could come out alive. Even if they did, half of them would be crippled. Heartbreak Valley wasn't just a saying. The average sentence in Lost Heart Valley was only 1 day. In just 1 day's sentence, only 1 in 100 people would be able to stay conscious and survive. Tian Chang's 1-month sentence was practically a declaration of his death. In the history of the Lost Heart Valley, there had never been a sinner who had stayed there for more than half a month. Of course, Tian Anping wasn't included. He had once taken the initiative to stay in Heartbreak Valley for a year. In short, many people from the Tian family would rather be executed than enter Heartbreak Valley. It was obvious how terrifying it was. Tian Chang naturally knew how difficult it was to deal with Tian Anping. Therefore, he had deliberated over his explanation countless times, hoping that no one could find any problems with it. His injuries couldn't be any more serious. They were injuries that could have killed him. However, he hadn't expected that Tian Anping wouldn't listen to his explanation because he knew that he was a smart person. You're the one who's smart. Your whole family is smart, Tian Chang roared in his heart, but that fear didn't lessen in the slightest. Heartbreak Valley was a place that everyone in the Tian family would turn pale at the mention of. He really didn't want to die. It hadn't been easy for him to climb to where he was today. He had tempered his cultivation, assassinated the family elders, and stolen the famed saber Chaoxin. In order to survive, he had killed all his teammates on planet Een. In order to survive, he had allowed himself to be seriously injured and on the verge of death. Perhaps he should have chosen to defect from the start. However, now that Tian Anping had appeared, running away was already an impossible task. Tian Chang looked at Tian Huanzhang with a gaze that was mixed with fear and pleading. The huge amount of wealth he had promised in private had been effective. Tian Huanzhang coughed lightly. Anping, he won't be able to escape death after a month in Heartbreak Valley. For Granduncle's sake, we should consider this matter at length. Tian Chang is an outstanding descendant of the Tian family. He's always been reliable and loyal to the family. If we just kill him like this, I'm afraid that our family members will be disheartened and disheartened. Did you hear that? Tian Anping looked at Tian Chang. Are you going to give Granduncle face? It's up to you whether you want to go to Lost Heart Valley or not. Tian Huanzhang's expression immediately turned ugly, but he didn't say anything in the end. He was the kind of person who didn't know his own worth at all. He relied on his status and qualifications to act like a tyrant. He actually thought that he could have any face in front of Tian Anping. There were many old fellows like him in the Tian family who didn't know how much weight he had and couldn't face reality at all. But it didn't matter. Tian Anping would use his own way to help them slowly face it. No one could escape from reality. It was the same for Tian Chang. Right now, he only had 2 choices. He could enter Heartbreak Valley and challenge the slim chance of survival, or he could be killed right now. Is this your reputation? You old fart, you opened your mouth and took so much money from me, but in the end you became mute after a fart? Tian Chang had already cursed Tian Huanzhang hundreds of times in his heart. But he didn't show it on his face. With a burst of determination, he quickly made a decision. He endured his injuries and kowtowed to Tian Huanzhang a few times. I've troubled you, Granduncle. He then kowtowed to Tian Anping. I've ruined young Master Ping's plan. Even if I die 100 times, I won't be able to absolve myself from the blame. I deserve to be punished. I'll go to Lost Heart Valley now." After kowtowing, he got up and turned around resolutely. Tian Huanzhang saw that a drop of tear fell from the corner of his eye. Even though he was used to worldly affairs and his heart had long been tempered like iron and stone, he couldn't help but feel sad at this moment. What a good child, so tough, so honest, but because of a mistake, he was forced to a dead end by Tian Anping, this bastard. Tian He and Gong Yanglu also didn't say a word and left with Tian Chang. They appeared to be equally loyal. They also had a 3-day sentence in Lost Heart Valley. Their chances of survival were also slim. But no one chose to betray Tian Chang and fight for a chance for themselves. This undoubtedly increased Tian Chang's credibility. In Tian Huanzhang's heart, the loyalty of these two people also added points for Tian Chang. What a good child. He could win people's hearts. But if he wanted to go against Tian Anping for this good child, then forget it. The more he thought about it, the more depressed he felt. He swung his sleeves and prepared to leave. "Wait!" Tian Anping stopped him. Tian Huanzhang suppressed his anger. "Anping, is there anything else you need from granduncle?" He was reminding Tian Anping. "Don't forget, in terms of seniority, I'm your granduncle." Tian Anping looked at him calmly. "I heard that you've spread the news that a life-extending treasure will appear in the Seven Stars Tower's secret realm this time?" The mission that Tian Chang received this time was a secret mission that was personally arranged by Tian Anping. He only told Tian Chang and Tian Yong the real mission right before entering the Seven Stars Valley and let them supervise each other. As for the others, they were only informed of the mission by Tian Chang and Tian Yong after entering the secret realm. In terms of all aspects, there was no possibility of the mission being leaked. Tian Huanzhang shouldn't have known about the mission in the secret realm this time. However, he only found out one thing today. The news that a life-extending treasure would appear in the secret realm of the Seven Stars Tower had already spread out. And the person who spread the news was Tian Huanzhang. "It's me, what's wrong?" Tian Huanzhang was a little confused. When Tian Chang pleaded with him, he didn't mention the details of the mission. He only said that Tian Anping didn't do the task well. He looked at Tian Anping's stern eyes and said with dissatisfaction, "It's just a fake news in cooperation with the marshal's residence. Why are you looking at me like that? You have connections with the marshal?" Tian Anping's expression became colder and colder. Facing Tian Anping's attitude, Tian Huanzhang was indeed a little flustered. He didn't want to admit his faint fear, but he had to. Thus he became more and more angry. "It's Wen Lianmu who sent someone to find me. He said that the army god's last disciple, Wang Yiwu, asked for help. I just did it casually. What's wrong? I can't even make a decision for such a small matter. Do I have to be blamed by you?" he said hatefully. "Even the clan leader won't say anything about this." Tian Anping shook his head and smiled. "I'll bear with this." He stopped smiling and pointed at Tian Huanzhang. "But I'll only bear with you this last time. Let me tell you something. When you're old, you have to admit it. Don't do useless things. You can't accomplish anything, but you're good at ruining things." Tian Anping. Tian Huanzhang was furious. At this time, there were many Tian clansmen in Seven Stars Valley. He was a respected Tian clan elder. How could he be humiliated like this? "Watch your attitude when you talk to me. Don't be rude all day. Do you really think no one in the clan can control you?" These words were tough on the outside but weak on the inside. Even if he was furious, he knew that he couldn't do anything to Tian Anping. He could only use his clan. "No matter if there's someone who can control me, at least that person can't be you. You better remember this. Don't provoke me again." Tian Anping was very calm. Tian Huanzhang glared at him angrily. He seemed to be unable to suppress his anger. Tian Anping raised his hands and dragged the iron chains that were connected to the shackles. I'm now shackled and can only use 50% of my strength. How about it? Do you want to try killing me? No one will blame you for killing a monster like me. You didn't do anything wrong. Instead, you did something good. From the comparison of our strength, my chance of winning is less than 10%. There was a trace of excitement in his eyes. How about it? Do you want to try? Tian Huanzhang knew very well that Tian Anping was telling the truth. The shackles did suppress his strength by at least half. This was not a lie. Then from the comparison of strength, his chance of winning was very high. However, to fight to the death with Tian Anping, Tian Huanzhang was furious. He flicked his sleeves and left. I'm just a junior. Why should I bother with you? Chapter 514. Tian Anping was not surprised by Tian Huanzhang's choice. If Tian Huanzhang still had such courage, he would not have been looked down upon by Tian Huanzhang with his outer building realm cultivation. To be able to cultivate to the outer building realm, one must have overcome countless difficult situations and must have a superior temperament and courage. However, many people slowly lost themselves in the endless glory over the long years. They lost the drive and courage they had when they climbed to this level. Tian Huanzhang was not alone. On the contrary, there were many people like him, and their numbers were increasing. They occupied a huge amount of resources and seized numerous opportunities, but they no longer had the courage to forge ahead. Those who truly wanted to forge ahead later could not even see the door. In Tian Anping's eyes, these people were already rotten branches on a huge tree, rice worms, wine sacks, and good-for-nothings. They were a burden on the huge Tian family. Of course, in the eyes of many people and forces, the rice worms of the outer building realm were still outer building realm cultivators after all. They were powerhouses and had considerable combat power. It was just that Tian Anping did not care about the standards of the world. Wen Lianmu, Wang Yiwu. Tian Anping pondered these two names. From now on, things are getting interesting. The huge Seven Stars Valley was soon emptied out. Tian Anping stood alone in the valley, looking at the sky in a daze. Xiao Tong looked at Jiang Wang from head to toe. Her big eyes were filled with even greater surprise. In her heart, her mistress was the most powerful person in the world. She would definitely win the first place in the Seven Stars Mystery Realm. She did not expect that the first place would be taken by Jiang Wang, who even looked a little shy. Hey, a lady should be more reserved. You can't look at him like that even if he's good-looking. Jiang Wuxia teased with a smile. He stepped between her and Jiang Wang, blocking her view. Xiao Tong, what's wrong? Don't you recognize me? You didn't even greet me. In terms of appearance, Jiang Wang could indeed be considered good-looking now. In the beginning, he could only be described as delicate and pretty. However, as time passed, he slowly grew out. The wind and frost had sculpted the corners of his face, which made the shape of his face clearer. The biggest change was in his temperament. In addition to his usual gentleness and politeness, he had honed the confidence and calmness of being able to look down on all mountains, and even more so, he was as firm as a pine tree standing on a high cliff. This greatly increased his charm. Of course, in terms of appearance, there was still no room for comparison with someone like Jiang Wuxia, who had grown up from a young age. Xiao Tong pouted and said unwillingly, "I don't dare." She seemed to be very familiar with Jiang Wuxia. It was probably because she had appeared in front of Li Fengyao too many times. Jiang Wuxia took a step forward and teased the little handmaiden happily. "What are you afraid of? Do you still have something to say?" Li Fengyao's cold voice instantly cooled Jiang Wuxia down. He put away the evil smile at the corner of his mouth and put on a serious look. He looked at Jiang Wang seriously. "I admire you very much. Would you consider working for me in the future?" After Jiang Wang defeated Lei Zhanqian with a single strike, he didn't think much of it. He didn't have enough bargaining chips to deal with a powerhouse of that level. After finding out that Jiang Wang's sword was not a conventional attack, he had the possibility of being recruited again. Jiang Wang was taken aback by Jiang Wuxie's sudden invitation. So she wasn't here for Li Fengyao. Thinking about it, it made sense. With Li Fengyao's personality, if he pestered her, he would really be beaten to death. Other things aside, you won't lack cultivation resources until you reach the Shindu realm. As for the future, we can talk about the future in the future. I don't make empty promises. From Jiang Wuxie's analysis, Jiang Wang, who had won first place in the Seven Stars secret realm and came out of the leader of the heavenly stars, had already opened the path to the outer building. And his experience in the heaven secret realm meant that he had the qualifications to enter the inner building. Jiang Wuxie placed a heavy bet on him reaching the Shindu realm. And the future, he didn't mention, was naturally what would happen after he won the throne. How long could the merit of ascending to the throne be exchanged for? The cultivation resources of the entire Qi dynasty was something that any cultivator could only dream of. Although he said that he wouldn't make empty promises, he still casually drew a pie in the sky. For those who were skilled in politics, drawing a pie in the sky was a basic ability that was carved into their instincts. Right, your surname is also Jiang. Jiang Wuxie continued to increase the stakes. Within a year, your name can be listed in the Jiang clan's genealogy. This sincerity was enough. Jiang Wuxie's influence was in the imperial clan court. He was the prince who had the most support of the imperial clan. So, there was no doubt that he could do it. Especially since Jiang Wang's surname was Jiang. As long as he traced his ancestry and found a suitable descendant, he could continue the genealogy. If his name was listed in the Qi Jiang clan's genealogy, it meant that Jiang Wang could be recognized as part of the Jiang clan's imperial clan. This wasn't just an honor. The benefits of becoming a member of the Jiang clan were innumerable. Just the cultivation techniques and secret techniques that could be obtained from the imperial clan's secret vault were enough to tempt anyone. In the chaotic period before Martial Emperor, there were many members of the imperial clan who were persecuted and fled the Qi dynasty. Your ancestor was one of them. He had been wandering in a foreign country for many years and now, he has returned to the imperial clan. What do you think? Afraid that Jiang Wang wasn't aware of his strength, Jiang Wuxie even went so far as to explain the process. It was completely feasible. Thank you for your high opinion of me, Your Highness. Jiang Wang smiled apologetically. However, Your Highness should ask Chung Gongxing about this. His attitude is my attitude. Chung Gongxing wasn't someone who could be fooled easily. Furthermore, given his status, there was no way he would interfere with the internal strife of the imperial clan. Jiang Wuxie smiled. Brother Jiang, can't you make your own decisions? Jiang Wang looked at him and said in a neither servile nor overbearing tone, I'm a man of my word. I'm the one who makes my own decisions. Jiang Wuxie nodded. Jiang Wuxie nodded and didn't force him. Of course, he wouldn't do something as stupid as making enemies after failing to recruit him. He acted as if nothing had happened and smiled at Li Fengyao again. Sister Li, are you going back to Linzi? We can travel together. His smile, which carried a hint of wickedness but was not annoying at all, was indeed very charming. However, because he knew his charm too well and was too good at using this kind of smile, Xiaotong felt that the shy and embarrassed Jiang Wang was cuter. Li Fengyao couldn't say anything about Jiang Wang's recruitment earlier, so he ignored Jiang Wuxie and said to Jiang Wang, I need to go out to sea for some business. You can go back to Linzi by yourself. Jiang Wang nodded in agreement. Jiang Wuxie laughed. What a coincidence! If you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten. I'm going to the seaside for some business. We're going in the same direction. Speaking of which, the heart-nourishing palace has an island near the sea. The scenery. Li Fengyao interrupted him with one sentence. We're not going in the same direction. Looking at Li Fengyao's unwavering gaze, Jiang Wuxie scratched his head. Is it not? Then I'll take my leave, Li Fengyao said. Bah! Jiang Wuxia turned and left without hesitation. He could tell that Li Fengyao was already impatient. He would never allow himself to be hated by a beautiful woman. Jiang Wang looked at the back of the ninth prince thoughtfully. Jiang Wuxia was said to be extreme and easily angered, but he didn't see that in this short period of time. He didn't know if it was because everything had its weakness or if it was just a cover-up. Chapter 5:15. After parting ways with Li Fengyao, Jiang Wang felt a sense of relief as he left the strictly symmetrical brick and tile of Jiu City. This wasn't only because Tian Anping hadn't discovered what had happened on planet Yin, but also because the city itself gave off a natural sense of oppression. Every table and chair was placed in a fixed position. Living in such a city would probably drive one crazy. Of course, this was the Tian clan city. Outsiders didn't have the right to interfere, nor could they interfere. It was worth mentioning that Lian Shao of the Southern Lian clan had also successfully passed through the 7-star pavilion's secret realm and had specially come to thank Jiang Wang. Jiang Wang had also given him the Swallow All's beak and asked him to pass it on to Lian Ke, asking him to help forge the weapon. He had also attached a letter stating his request. He didn't have to worry about Lian Shao being greedy for the treasure. Firstly, Lian Ke had acknowledged Lian Shao's character. Secondly, Lian Ke's status within the Lian clan was getting higher and higher. With something like a life tablet, the Lian clan wouldn't run away. He had taken Li Fengyao's carriage to Jiu City. He had also hired a carriage to return to Linzi. It wasn't because he wanted to be lazy, but because he could cultivate while rushing back. He had to make the best use of his time and consolidate his gains from the secret realm as soon as possible. The process of becoming stronger didn't allow for the slightest bit of slack. 30% of Qi's carriage business was the Bao clan's business. This included transporting goods, renting carriages, and even hiring coachmen. Probably only a powerful country like Qi, with its peaceful borders, could afford to do this kind of transportation business. Only a power like the Bao clan could take over such a large-scale business in one go. Right now, Jiang Wang had only hired a coachman and rented a carriage. Apart from the Bao clan's carriage business, no other carriage business could transport people from Jiu City to Linzi across several prefectures. Perhaps other carriage businesses could do it, but the Bao clan made it impossible for them. Professional coachmen were well trained. Since the employer didn't have any intention of speaking, they remained silent the entire time. They brought their own rations and water, so they rarely had to stop along the way. Jiang Wang sat cross-legged in the carriage and spent most of his time immersed in cultivation. Other than tending to the isolated island of heaven and earth and exploring the fog of obscurity, he also went to the great illusionary land to fight a few battles. After missing the Blessed Land Challenge on September 15th, he naturally landed on Mount Gazao, which was ranked 36th among the Blessed Lands. There were only 550 points left in his production. This bit of merit was nothing much, but this was already the last place in the upper 36 Blessed Lands. If his ranking dropped any further, he would fall into the lower 36 Blessed Lands. Jiang Wang didn't know what he would lose, but he knew it wouldn't be a good thing. However, it was very difficult to increase one's strength in one go. There was no other way except for hard work. No matter how anxious he was, the Blessed Lands were not something that he could defend with his current strength. After not fighting in the great illusionary realm for a period of time, his ranking had dropped quite a bit. However, the current Jiang Wang was much stronger than before he entered the 7 Stars Valley. With consecutive victories, he quickly regained the glory of being a great Void Realm cultivator. Moreover, this time, he did not feel any strain at all. He very naturally looked at Lu He first. 5th, 4th, 3rd, he didn't stop until Jiang Yan appeared. After a long silence, Jiang Yan's voice rang out in the heavenly palace again. Your strength has improved very quickly. It's time to consider how to deal with Sacred Lord White Bones. How have you been living during this time? Jiang Wang calmed himself down and asked. Thank you for your hospitality. It's not bad. He didn't know whether Jiang Yan's silence during this time was because he was in seclusion or because he was disturbed by the Seven Stars Tower's secret realm. However, he definitely wouldn't answer Jiang Wang's doubts. Jiang Wang followed his words and asked, Do you think it's possible for me to defeat Sacred Lord White Bones now? When you reach the inner mansion, coupled with my understanding of the White Bones path, you'll have a 50% chance. It didn't matter if Jiang Yan was being overconfident or if he was truly confident. Jiang Wang had already gotten the information he wanted. It seems that your strength has improved greatly during this period of time. Jiang Yan's answer was somewhat meaningful. Of course, you and I are one. The stronger you are, the stronger I will be. Is that so? Jiang Wang didn't comment. He didn't believe such words at all. His strength was obtained through his own cultivation bit by bit. He knew very well that none of his strength had been shared. Then how did he make Jiang Yan stronger? Jiang Wang didn't believe that there was such a powerful person in this world who could enjoy the fruits of others' labor. However, Jiang Yan had always been mysterious. For the time being, he could only leave him alone. When he opened the inner mansion, the Tongtian Palace would have the possibility to temporarily replace him. At that time, he would have more room to maneuver, and he would have more choices in how to deal with Jiang Yan. So he continued to cultivate. The isolated island of heaven and earth was full of vitality. The soaring Taoist veins had almost reached the border of the fog of obscurity before returning. The first inner mansion was like a lone lamp, shining brightly in the fog of obscurity. Jiang Wang could even feel the seed of divine power that was ready to move, waiting for him to pluck it. He had to wait a little longer. Jiang Wang told himself. Immersed in cultivation, his perception of time and distance was very blurry. However, when an instinctive sense of danger appeared, Jiang Wang immediately opened his eyes. A black shadow dashed into the carriage. Be quiet or I'll kill you. The black shadow's movements were very practiced. He casually threw down a soundproof formation disc, took out a dagger, and viciously aimed it at Jiang Wang. The coachman was completely unaware of what was happening in the carriage. He was still driving obediently. The wheels rolled along the official road, producing a monotonous sound. However, the situation inside the carriage was different. The black shadow who had arrogantly dashed into the carriage was now pressed against the corner of the carriage, facing in and back out. His entire face was squeezed into a right angle by the two sides of the carriage. Jiang Wang easily grabbed the back of his neck with one hand and pressed him against the corner of the carriage. His other hand was playing with the gleaming dagger. Who sent you? What do you want? Jiang Wang felt that this was absurd. This black shadow was really too inexplicable. He completely believed that someone would want to hire an assassin to assassinate him. After all, he had offended many people. However, those who knew a little about him wouldn't place their hopes on such a powerful assassin. However, if it was a robbery, the person in this carriage didn't look like a rich person. If it was for money, it seemed that he lacked both vision and ambition. Master, it's a misunderstanding. The black shadow's big face was pressed against the corner of the carriage. He was squeezed out with great effort and difficulty. I can explain. I can definitely explain. As soon as the voice came out, Jiang Wang felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Therefore, he let go of his hand. When the person turned around, he took off his mask. It's you. Both Jiang Wang and the Black Shadow were stunned. Jiang Wang recognized that this person was the assassin he met in Qingyang Town, Su Xiuxing from World Tower. Master Jiang. Long time no see. Su Xiuxing reacted quickly. His voice was low and dignified. Jiang Wang's response was very direct. He held the dagger he seized from Su Xiuxing horizontally in front of the man so that he could see it clearly. Then, he exerted force in his hand and broke it into 2 pieces. His original intention was to show his ruthlessness. At the same time, he also wanted to warn this guy not to talk too much nonsense and to get to the point quickly. However, after not seeing Su Xiuxing for a while, he forgot about Su Xiuxing's stingy character. The man was directly furious. He rushed over with bared fangs and brandished his claws. "My dagger! You destroyed my dagger again! This is the 2nd time!" His voice was somewhat mournful. Jiang Wang kicked him back. He was paralyzed there, crying, "Give me back my dagger!" His voice was mournful and sorrowful. Those who heard it were sad and those who saw it shed tears. Chapter 5:16. I remember that your last dagger was chewed up by the pig-bone face. You can't blame me for that, right? Jiang Wang said helplessly. Give me back my talismans. Give me back my Daoyuan stones. Su Xiuxing threw a tantrum. I say, don't you think you don't understand the situation? Jiang Wang lifted him up. You haven't explained to me why you crawled into my carriage. Why are you pointing a dagger at me? It was more normal to chat like this. He almost felt like he was in the wrong when he followed this kid's pace. Damn, I took his talismans and Daoyuan stones because he tried to assassinate me first. I was kind enough to let him live. Why does it seem like I bullied him? You better let go of my hand. Su Xiuxing's expression suddenly became serious, even severe. Do you know who I'm working for now? Su Xiuxing asked. Jiang Wang obviously knew who he was with. When he was in Songfeng City, he asked World Towers A Su to send a letter to Yang Ting. At that time, he asked A Su to clean up the sect. At that time, A Su said that Su Xiuxing had sneaked into the doorless hell. In other words, his current boss was Yin Guan. As a member of the doorless hell, what did he want to do by crawling into a carriage on the official road? Considering the destination of the carriage, the answer was obvious. He could only take the opportunity to sneak into Linzi. Su Xiuxing's identity was not good for him to sneak into Linzi. In other words, he didn't want to expose that he had sneaked into Linzi. So, what did the doorless hell want to do in Linzi? Oh? Who are you with now? Jiang Wang pretended not to know and acted very curious. Of course I'm with. Su Xiuxing said halfway. He probably remembered that his current organization was not the World Tower of the past, so he swallowed his words. He paused for a while and then sneered. You don't know what kind of organization you're provoking. You don't know who you're talking to. I really don't know. Jiang Wang was quite cooperative. Then tell me. Su Xiuxing pretended to look at Jiang Wang for a while and shook his head. Forget it. After all, we know each other. Our organization is too dangerous. It's not good to involve you. Oh. Jiang Wang quietly watched his performance. Su Xiuxing pretentiously lifted the curtain, but in fact, she had been peeking at Jiang Wang's expression. Seeing that he didn't seem to have any objections, she continued, It's already so late. No, I have to go back. Otherwise, my boss will definitely go crazy if he doesn't see me later. What will happen if he goes crazy? Jiang Wang was very supportive. That would be too bloody. Su Xiuxing's face was full of pity, and he said vividly, It's very likely that he killed his way from Pingxi County to Linhai County, killing until rivers of blood flowed and corpses were scattered for thousands of miles. Those of you who are still on your way won't be spared. The 3 counties of Yangdi had already completely belonged to Qi. Hengyang County should be the border county of the western region now, but many people still regarded Pingxi as a border county. The impression had been there for many years and couldn't be changed in a short time. From Pingxi County to Linhai County, he had already killed his way through Qi. This boast was a bit too much. However, Jiang Wang still cooperated and said in surprise, Is your boss that cruel? It's more than that. Su Xiuxing was full of nonsense. He has a green face and fangs. He's 20 feet tall and eats people's hearts every meal. He has killed at least 80,000 people, if not 100,000. Old friend, you must avoid him. Jiang Wang was now an old friend again. A gentleman doesn't stand under a collapsing wall. Su Xiuxing advised earnestly. Jiang Wang seemed to understand and said with emotion, I didn't expect you to be so important to your boss. Such a terrifying person would go crazy because he can't see you. Alas, although I haven't been in the organization for long. Su Xiuxing shook his head helplessly. I can't help it. I'm too outstanding. Jiang Wang nodded solemnly, expressing his deep agreement. Okay, let's stop here for today. Su Xiuxing saw that it was about time, so he stood up decisively and said, I have to go back and comfort our boss. The common people are the most important. Let's put our personal relationship aside first. Seeing that Jiang Wang didn't intend to stop him, he quickly jumped out of the window and left as quickly as he came. After jumping out of the window, Su Xiuxing ran for a long time before he let out a sigh of relief and stopped. He almost wanted to applaud his own quick-wittedness. However, he quickly slapped his forehead and was extremely annoyed. My silent formation disc. He ran in a hurry and forgot to take it with him. It was worth a lot of Dao origin stones. However, he really lacked the courage to go back and ask Jiang Wang for the formation disc. Nothing good will come out of meeting Jiang Wang. Forget it, I'll just treat it as feeding pigs. He cursed and left the place. No matter what, the mission had to continue. He still had to sneak into Linzi. He originally wanted to sneak into Linzi City, but he saw that the carriage was unobstructed and had all the rules. The carriages and horses under the Bao family's control were regulated, and Jiang Wang was a duke. Of course, it wouldn't be a problem for him to pass through Qi. Thus, he had an idea. He didn't expect that fate. He had to change his method. Sneaking into the carriage wouldn't work. Before he got into the carriage, no one would know whether the person inside was a dog or a human. Su Xiuxing thought fiercely. In such a short time, he had already cursed Jiang Wang more than 10 times in his mind. If he had learned Yinguan's art of killing curses and had Yinguan's strength, Jiang Wang would at least be seriously injured by now. Unfortunately, he didn't. Why are you still here? A voice suddenly asked. Su Xiuxing was frightened. He quickly turned around and saw a man wearing a black mask. This mask was a human face, revealing only the eyes and mouth. However, it was completely black. There was only a white door painted on the forehead. Inside the door, there were 2 blood-red words, Coroner. This mask represented the 4th person of No Door to Hell, Coroner Wang. Under the bounty of the state of Chu and the state of Jing, and the pursuit of experts from all over the world, the No Door to Hell was not destroyed. Instead, it developed at an astonishing speed. Now, there were 10 core members of No Door to Hell. They were known as the 10 Kings of Hell, and they could decide the life and death of people. They also had various subordinates who were responsible for intelligence, management, and so on. They had developed into the most famous killer organization in the eastern region. Su Xiuxing was one of the outer members of No Door to Hell. Meeting Coroner Wang here, Su Xiuxing's feet were cold. He didn't dare to act rashly. He honestly said, I'm trying to sneak into Linzi. Coroner Wang's voice was hoarse, as if he wasn't used to speaking. Did you fight with someone just now? Well, Su Xiuxing didn't want to confess that he had just met Jiang Wang. On the one hand, it would show that he was too incompetent. On the other hand, he didn't want Jiang Wang to die. Although he wished for nothing more than to give Jiang Wang a good beating and beat him until he cried for his parents, it was far from the point where he wanted to kill him. In particular, he knew very well that he could live only because Jiang Wang let him go. It was the same when he was in Qingyang town. Of course, if someone was willing to pay a high price for Jiang Wang's head, they could negotiate. As a killer, he didn't care about feelings. Coroner Wang took a step closer. Su Xiuxing's hair stood on end. He closed his eyes and shouted, "I did fight with someone just now. I wanted to sneak into his carriage, but I was beaten out." "Where?" Then he heard another voice ask. Chapter 5:17. The carriage was still moving. The coachman had no idea what was going on in the carriage. In the peaceful lives of many ordinary people, they may have brushed shoulders with stormy stories, but they were ignorant and thought that time was peaceful. From this point of view, being ordinary might be a kind of happiness. Jiang Wang looked at the silent array disc in the carriage, and put it away. Although it was impossible for this item to be of high quality, it would still be worth at least a few hundred Dao Yuan stones if it was sold. Lord Jiang was now penniless. Of course, he wouldn't believe Su Xiuxing's nonsense, but this didn't stop him from letting Su Xiuxing go. After all, they had fought side by side in Qingyang town. There was no need to fight to the death. Moreover, he wanted to see if he could contact Yinguan through Su Xiuxing. Chung Gengsheng had been thinking about the door to hell for a long time, but he hadn't had the chance to do so. Before the first wave subsided, another wave came. After dealing with Su Xiuxing, Jiang Wang was about to continue cultivating. Suddenly, he felt a sense of danger. Without hesitation, he crashed through the back wall of the carriage, and out of it. Boom! Right in front of Jiang Wang. A huge gold ingot fell from the sky and crushed the innocent coachman, his horse, and the carriage into a pile of mixed debris that could not be seen clearly. This gold ingot came too quickly. Both the man and the horse didn't have time to cry out. Everything happened so suddenly. The calmly moving carriage was wiped out in an instant. Only Jiang Wang was left standing on the official road. Jiang Wang looked up and saw a man dressed like a Confucian scholar standing on top of the gold ingot. His clothes were fluttering. It was Su Shi. Jiang Wang's first thought was that Su Shi had gone crazy. The Jiubao merchants were finished. No matter what, he was still a baron personally conferred by the Qi Emperor. Attacking him for no reason was equivalent to cutting himself off from the Qi Empire. When he left Linzi, the Jiubao merchants were already in a precarious situation. At that time, Chung Gengsheng had told him not to worry, and he indeed trusted Chung Gengsheng's ability. However, Jiang Wang did not expect that the Jiubao merchants would be forced into a dead end while he was in the secret land of the Seven Stars Pavilion. Chung Gengsheng was truly admirable. He had handled this matter beautifully. But he did a great job. He forced Su Shi, the leader of the association, to come out of the city to make trouble for Jiang Wang. Imagine a desperate Su Shi. If he wanted to take revenge, what choice did he have? It was impossible to assassinate Chung Gengsheng in Linzi, so Jiang Wang, who had just left the Great Lake County and was rushing to Linzi, was undoubtedly the best choice. It was even possible to transfer Chung Gengsheng out of Linzi through Jiang Wang. Jiang Wang didn't hide his trip this time. He openly rented a carriage, and the route back to Linzi wasn't a secret. It was easy for Su Shi to find out. However, his open and aboveboard was actually to prevent Lei Zhanqian from doing something stupid. He didn't expect that it would give Su Shi a chance. However, he didn't need to think about these things for now. What Jiang Wang needed to consider most now was how to survive. Yes, he had survived the attack of Su Shi, who was at the peak of the outer building realm. He had once killed Ji Qing of the outer building realm, but that was when he joined forces with Chung Gengsheng and 14. Moreover, he commanded a powerful army like the Qiu Slaughter Army to stimulate the power of the army formation. At that time, Ji Qing was already old and weak. 3 of the 4 great sacred buildings had collapsed, and he had spent too much energy on the battlefield. However, Su Shi was now at the peak of his power. I heard that after you entered the inner house, you wanted to find Deputy Leader Qing. Seeing that you're close to entering the inner house, I came to find you first to prevent you from working too hard. Su Shi had always considered himself the dean of the academy, not the leader of the association. Perhaps it was because the Jiubao merchants were about to disappear that he started to cherish this title. He stood on the huge gold ingot and looked down at Jiang Wang. There wasn't much hatred in his expression, but his killing intent was very determined. Jiang Wang held his sword in front of his eyes and said only one word, "Come." Chang Si jumped out of the divine dragonwood scabbard and drew a line in the air. Following his interest, his sword cut through the air. The second move of the human path sword, famous scholar destitute. Instead, he attacked first. He leaped into the air and held his sword horizontally. This move was like a famous scholar waving his brush. It had an elegant temperament. It was neither fast nor weak. However, Su Shi was calm and only raised one finger. Lack of a coin, hunger rumbling. There seemed to be a barrier between the sword of famous scholar destitute and Su Shi. Jiang Wang hadn't finished his move yet, but he had already realized that no matter how hard he tried, this move would only miss his opponent by a hair's breadth. He didn't dare to waste an opportunity to fight with Su Shi, who was 2 stages lower than him. So bang 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 bang. His body turned into a flaming meteor and soared into the sky. Since his attack didn't hit, he wanted to escape. However, Su Shi shook his head. Lack of a coin, dilemma. Jiang Wang's escape technique instantly collapsed and he appeared in the air. He couldn't escape or turn back to fight. He was indeed in a dilemma. He had lost his chance. The situation was in Su Shi's hands. Of course, Jiang Wang wouldn't give up. With a thought, he used Binding Tiger with 5 qi. At the same time, he quickly formed a seal and ignited the jealous fire. Su Shi sneered and stretched out his right hand, then immediately flipped it. Lack of a coin, life and death. Binding Tiger with 5 qi was silent, and the jealous fire didn't affect it at all. However, Jiang Wang seemed to have been hit hard and was slapped to the ground. Perhaps it was because he had been suppressing his anger for too long and had nowhere to vent it. Facing Jiang Wang, who was only at the peak of the soaring dragon realm, Su Shi didn't even try to test him. He used his ultimate move and showed his peak, not giving him any chance at all. Su Shi wasn't an ordinary outer building realm expert. He had walked his own path and had a chance to reach the divine arrival realm. His business path and his will were completely reflected in the series of attacks just now. Lack of a coin, hunger. Lack of a coin, dilemma. Lack of a coin, life and death. His flipped right hand suddenly clenched, as if he was squeezing Jiang Wang's heart. A man can't be poor. People avoid me like snakes and scorpions. Jiang Wang, who was trying his best to leap toward the soaring dragon realm of the first inner mansion, suddenly fell to the isolated island of heaven and earth. He could clearly feel that his Tao energy was dispersing and his physical strength was fading away. He had become a truly and thoroughly poor person. The world's disgust, contempt, alienation, and indifference were all entangled in Jiang Wang's body. For a moment, his flesh bulged and his blood coagulated. It was as if thousands of snakes and scorpions were born. Life and death were beyond his control. It wouldn't be long before Jiang Wang disappeared from this world and disintegrated into the snakes and scorpions that thousands of people avoided like the plague. At this moment, a clear voice asked, "Jiubao merchants, Su Shi?" Along with this voice, a handsome long-haired man descended from the sky and faced Su Shi. At the same time, he grabbed with his hand. The negative emotions associated with poverty in Jiang Wang's body found an outlet at this moment and were absorbed in an instant. Jiang Wang felt as if he had been pardoned. His whole body twitched as he stood up. This time, he had truly escaped death. He recognized at a glance that it was Yin Guan who had appeared at this moment to save him. He had let Su Xiuxing go so that he could meet Yin Guan. But he really didn't expect that he would need Yin Guan to save his life. He also didn't expect Su Shi to be so strong that he didn't have any chance to resist. He couldn't even knock on the inner mansion and remove the supernatural power in advance. If Yin Guan had come a little later, he would have died today. Su Shi's expression became serious. He felt that things were out of control at this moment. Could it be that the hateful little fatty Zhenggenjia had other plans? Was he really so invulnerable? "Who are you?" he asked. No need to ask this question. Yin Guan's long hair fluttered as he directly flew forward. "Seeing me means that you will die. P.S. Lack of recommendations, hungry. No monthly votes in a dilemma. Few subscriptions in a dilemma of life and death. Novels can't go without subscriptions, and people avoid me like I'm a snake. You will die if I complete the path of novels, so you know." Chapter 518. Facing Su Shi, who was at the peak of the outer building realm, Yin Guan showed no hesitation or fear. It showed his great confidence. Before he finished speaking, a fist was already in front of his face. What welcomed the fist was Su Shi's palm. The fist and palm collided. A huge impact exploded from the point of contact. Even the clouds in the sky were blown away. Like a hurricane, everything around the two of them was expanding outward. Only the two of them who were fighting did not move at all. Su Shi was so angry that he laughed. "How dare you? Let's see how you're going to kill me." Brilliant golden light exploded from his palm. He turned his palm into a claw and wanted to swallow his opponent with gold. He wanted to kindly accept his opponent's fist. Crunch, crunch. Yin Guan's knuckles suddenly cracked. In front of the brilliant golden light, a strange green light rippled. At this moment, one fist turned into 1,000 fists. Thousands of fists fell at the same time. If Su Shi wanted to kindly accept it, he would let him have enough. He would let him eat until he died. Every single one of his punches was like a landslide. Such fist momentum covered the sky and the earth. Even Su Shi could only avoid it for now. He dispersed his claw momentum and retreated. Finally, he left the gold ingot under his feet. Yin Guan followed closely. He stepped on the gold ingot and turned it into golden light. With his excellent combat awareness, he sensed that Su Shi had a backup plan on the gold ingot and eliminated the hidden danger in advance. The strange green light chased after the brilliant golden light. Seeing that his trap had been broken, Su Shi did not show any weakness. He put his thumb, index finger, and middle finger between his eyebrows to communicate with his spirit. Then, he turned his hand and pointed it at his opponent. His 5 fingers were wide open. "Wine with 1,000 taels of gold and a beauty with 10,000 taels of gold. Take all the wealth in the world and never let me be poor." The green light around Yin Guan was robbed at this moment. It turned into green flowers and fell from Yin Guan's body one by one. This process was so clear in his vision, and so straightforward. No matter how strong Yin Guan was, he could not withstand this continuous weakening. If he could not lock his wealth in time, he would definitely lose. This was Su Shi's cultivation. This was Su Shi's business. In his business, wealth was the foundation of everything. Wealth was the source of everything. Therefore, he had to pursue profit. Pursue riches in life, not poverty. And now, he wanted to plunder his opponent's wealth and turn his opponent into a poor person who had nothing. Living underground, apart from the strength of a mortal, there was nothing else, poverty. As for Yin Guan, he was still using his Tao. People should hate and take revenge. One after another, the number of green flowers did not decrease. Instead, more and more of them fell. Yin Guan was almost cooperating with Su Shi's plundering. People should have grievances, it's unfair. More and more green flowers floated towards Su Shi like duckweed in the wind. Since he wanted to plunder, he would give him hatred, resentment, and the most evil curse power. He wanted to see if Guan would run out of energy first, or if She would be the first to succumb to the backlash of this chaotic energy. Using Tao to respond to Tao, meeting life and death. She couldn't back down now. At such a time, if he were to stop, Guan would definitely take advantage of the situation and crush him as easily as crushing dry weeds. There would be no need to talk about the outcome of the battle. Therefore, he could only grit his teeth and endure. If this person dared to risk his life, why wouldn't She dare? Moreover, he was the plundering party. He had more advantages and more initiative. He didn't move his hands, but his eyes were already looking at Jiang Wang. At this time, he was in a deadlock with his opponent. The biggest variable was Jiang Wang. He was confident that he could easily defeat Jiang Wang even if he only had one hand free. After all, he was just a soaring dragon cultivator. Jiang Wang didn't disappoint him. Of course, he wouldn't lose his courage because of his previous failure. Running away might be the safest choice. Going to Linzi to find help was also a good excuse. However, Guan was fighting for him. He wouldn't turn around. Supporting his body, which had been drained of energy, he strode over with determination. The 9 Milky Way vortexes spun crazily. Some Tao essence was born. The Tao meridian soared like a dragon and rushed towards the first inner mansion. Supernatural power, supernatural power. His momentum rose and kept rising. Then, it stopped abruptly. She was shocked. However, this shock was immediately extinguished. The hand behind his back had hollowed out his heart. Plunder had collapsed. At the last moment of his life, She turned around. However, he saw a mask as black as ink. There was a pale door on the forehead. On the door, the word coroner was written in blood. His appearance had actually been so soundless and secretive to the point that even She hadn't noticed him in the slightest, and the moment he made his move, it was the end. Hell had arrived. Coroner King. Doorless Hell. Guan. Looking at the mask, She instantly connected the dots. He turned around and looked at Guan in disbelief. You dare to come to Qi? What he couldn't understand was why Doorless Hell would come out to save Jiang Wang. However, he couldn't ask. Guan directly punched him, shattering his head that still carried a look of shock. There's no need for you to worry, he said. Jiang Wang had stopped his advancement to the inner residence of the divine ability because he had seen the Coroner King. In such a short time, he saw 2 outer mansion cultivators from Doorless Hell in succession. Although they were both outer mansion cultivators, today's Guan was more than a level stronger than when he saw him in Yu country. Shi's corpse fell. Guan said calmly, he already has his own path. He shouldn't die so easily. Coroner King said, in front of King Qinguang, there's nothing difficult about dying. In the legends, the first of the 10 kings of hell was King Qinguang. Guan had always shown his true face to others and didn't hide it. However, in Doorless Hell, he was usually called King Qinguang. Coroner King's voice was hoarse. He didn't seem to be good at speaking. However, he was very aware of flattering his boss. Guan didn't comment. However, he obviously agreed that this was the truth. He turned around and looked at Jiang Wang with a faint smile. Long time no see, Jiang Wang greeted him. Yes, long time, Guan said. Less than a year wasn't that long. However, in the time they were apart, the two of them had experienced a lot. That was why they felt that it had been a long time. Jiang Wang had experienced a war, 2 arcane realms, and the open and covert struggles in Linzi City. Guan started from nothing and developed Doorless Hell to its current scale. How could his experiences be described in a few words? He shook his head and said slowly, my subordinate was beaten up. As the boss, I came to avenge him. I didn't expect it to be you. At this moment, Su Xiuxing crawled out from his hiding place. He really didn't expect his new boss to know Jiang Wang. His boss even killed a peak outer mansion cultivator to save him. They seemed to be very close. At this moment, Su Xiuxing was on the verge of crying. He didn't know why, but he suddenly remembered the harsh words he said to Jiang Wangfang before he ran away in Qingyang town. He didn't remember anything else, except for one sentence that was very clear. "Brat, just you wait. Shouldn't I be the one leading a number of experts to surround the brat surnamed Jiang ferociously? I didn't want to wait for today's situation. How cruel fate is." Chapter 519. In contrast to Su Xiuxing's uneasiness, Jiang Wang knew full well that Yin Guan's visit this time wasn't as simple as getting back at his underling. Could it be that an organization like Hell's Doorless had appeared outside of Linzi City for an excursion? They'd mobilized at least 2 Yamakings, and Hell's Doorless had an ulterior motive. Meanwhile, Su Xiuxing had been expelled during the process of infiltrating Linzi City. Yin Guan's purpose of chasing after him was to silence him. It was only after discovering Jiang Wang's presence that he changed his mind. Jiang Wang wasn't stupid, so he knew exactly what he should say now. "I owe you my life," Jiang Wang said. Yin Guan's expression turned serious. "Can I trust you?" he asked. "Of course." Jiang Wang said, "I'm Jiang Wang. I believe you're a person who pays back kindness and grudges." Yin Guan said, "But people like us are precarious. I'm afraid we can't wait too long. It's best if we take revenge today. We underestimated the security forces in Chidu. It's just a temporary operation, so we can't go in openly." He asked directly, "Are you willing to help us?" Su Xiuxing's eyes widened. He was surprised by Jiang Wang's confidence in his so-called character, but he was even more surprised that his boss actually approved of it. Is this still the murderous King Qinguang? Is there really such a thing as credibility these days? Su Xiuxing didn't believe it. He'd sold World Tower very decisively back then. Jiang Wang thought about it seriously. With his recent operations in Linzi and his noble status, he could definitely do this. But he didn't know what Yin Guan's purpose was, or how big of a fuss it would cause. Of course, Yin Guan couldn't tell him. So if he agreed, he would have to make preparations to sever ties with Chung Gongxing and his other friends in advance. After the incident, he would probably be exiled to the ends of the world. Perhaps Yin Guan saved him so that he could enter Linzi City openly. But as a benefactor, he naturally couldn't think like that. A gentleman judged his actions, not his heart. A life-saving grace was a life-saving grace. If one speculated about the kindness of others and let it go calmly, could one really be calm? He was just lying to himself. In order to repay the favor of saving his life, Jiang Wang was willing to give up the reputation and foundation he had earned in Qi. There was no need to mention such a price. A favor should be repaid, so there was no need to sacrifice anything. However, Jiang Wang had a clear thought in his mind. He asked, "I know that Doorless Hell is an assassin organization. You must have a purpose for coming here. I only ask, will you torture the innocent? Would it affect the common people? If so, I can't agree. I can't kill innocent people just because you saved me." "So there are conditions when repaying a debt of gratitude?" Coroner Wang said bitterly. "Your character is just SOSO." Jiang Wang didn't get angry because of this degree of mockery. He just said calmly, "If Yin Guan was in danger, I would risk my life to save him. But to help him kill the innocent, I really can't do it." Coroner Wang sneered, "Does the great King Qinguang need a small, soaring dragon cultivator like you to save him?" Yin Guan raised his hand to stop him. He looked at Jiang Wang and said, "I may have tortured the innocent, but I have killed so many people. Who knows who is innocent and who deserves to die? In order to complete the mission, I would do anything, and of course, I didn't care about the common people. Speaking of collateral damage, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I don't remember. But the people we are going to kill this time are not innocent. Also, in view of your principles, I am willing to restrain my subordinates to the greatest extent and not take the initiative to hurt the common people. What do you think? Saying things to this extent, Yin Guan was already very sincere. Jiang Wang said, I have another condition. Coroner Wang was already impatient. You want a yard after taking an inch. Are you done yet? Yin Guan kept his patience, say it. The target of your operation can't involve Chung Gungxing, Jiang Wang said. This is my last condition. Yin Guan thought for a moment and asked, Who is he to you? Friend. Just for a friend, you are here to negotiate with the gates of hell. Yin Guan looked at Jiang Wang. His eyes were saying, You know what danger you are risking, don't you? Jiang Wang only said, It is easy to get a daughter, but hard to find a close friend. Coroner Wang opened his mouth, probably wanting to mock him, but for some reason, he chose to remain silent. Okay, Yin Guan said, the person I want to kill is not Chongxian. When I go back, I will arrange this matter. It can be done in 2 days at most. Jiang Wang had calculated the process in his mind. In fact, it would only take 1 day. The extra time was used to cut ties with Chung Gungxing, Li Longchuan, and the others, so that his betrayal wouldn't affect them. Very good. Yin Guan tore off a strand of hair and handed it to Jiang Wang. When you are ready, burn the hair and inform me. Jiang Wang silently accepted it. The two sides had reached an agreement. Probably to ease the atmosphere, Yin Guan suddenly asked, I see that your qi is smooth. Why didn't you knock on the door of the inner mansion before? Were you deliberately waiting for me? At the beginning of the battle, Jiang Wang indeed didn't immediately knock on the door of the inner mansion. At that time, his plan was to escape with 1 strike. He underestimated Su Shi's strength and only thought of him as an ordinary outer mansion expert. By the time the battle began, it was already too late to knock on the door of the inner mansion. Jiang Wang said, I wasn't sure you would come. I just felt that my chance hadn't come yet. Knocking on the door of the inner mansion isn't perfect enough. He was indeed waiting for someone, but not for Yin Guan. He was waiting for someone invited by Chung Gungxing, such as Chongxian, Chu Liang, or some other master. Su Shi's ambush couldn't be hidden from Chung Gungxing. In other words, he probably didn't have to hide from Chung Gungxing. But he didn't wait. Of course, there was no need to say this to Yin Guan. Yes, it's good to be perfect. The more perfect it is now, the wider the road in the future. Yin Guan sighed. There was a hint of envy in his voice. Jiang Wang's way of walking down step by step was the only way to reach the heavens. De Qi's military god had chosen such a path for Wang Yiwu. But because of the environment in Yu country, he couldn't achieve perfection step by step. He could only choose to overdraw his potential and advance in advance. With your strength, the road is smooth no matter how difficult it is, Jiang Wang said seriously. It wasn't hard to see that he was speaking from the bottom of his heart. Of course. Yin Guan smiled and turned to leave. I'll wait for your news. After leaving here and sending Su Xiuxing away, Coroner Wang asked, Is that boy trustworthy? Yin Guan said, I know him. He's a good person. At that time, they were just strangers. Jiang Wang, who was in a foreign country, was willing to step forward to save his cousin. People change, Coroner Wang said. Of course. Yin Guan agreed. He was used to seeing too many things. But so what if he changes? If he betrays us, we won't lose anything. He doesn't know what our goal is. If we alert Bea, it will alert the enemy and disrupt our focus. We'll have a better chance, won't we? Yin Guan smiled. He can't possibly bring Jiang Mingxiong here without knowing our goal, right? If he has that much face, Jiang Mingxiong won't be so free. Then we won't die unjustly. Coroner Wang still felt that Yin Guan's actions were too risky. But after thinking about it, it would be stranger if an organization like Hell's Doorless didn't take risk. So he fell silent. Chapter 520. The place where the incident had occurred was still some distance away from Linzi City. Although it was one of the main roads leading to Linzi, probably because Su Shi had made arrangements beforehand, no one had come here for a long time. Jiang Wang was in a hurry to get back to Linzi, so he had no intention of collecting the body. The men of No Door to Hell didn't care either. There was only Su Shi's headless body and the pile of sawdust and flesh on the ground. That was originally the carriage driver and the carriage. Ordinary people's lives were peaceful most of the time, but at the same time, they didn't have the ability to defend themselves against accident. After the men of No Door to Hell and Jiang Wang left, under the pile of sawdust and flesh, the shadow of a huge gold ingot slowly rose from an unknown depth in the ground. After rising into the air, the gold ingot turned from virtual to real. Then it split in the middle, revealing the person lying inside with his eyes closed. If Yin Guan had returned, he would probably have killed him again, because he was Su Shi. The body on the ground was still there, its head smashed by Yin Guan's own hands. It seemed so unreal. Right now, the gold ingot was like a coffin. This Su Shi's face was much paler than before. He slowly opened his eyes and floated up. He casually shrank the gold ingot and took it back. He glanced at his own body on the ground and flew away without much expression. Now, he had to admit that he had made the worst decision since the establishment of the Jubao merchant. From a purely personal point of view, choosing Yonggenzuan wasn't a problem. But he shouldn't have cooperated with Cheng Gongxing first and then stepped on Cheng Gongxing. Or if he wanted to step on Cheng Gongxing, he should have directly stepped on him to death. He shouldn't have taken it for granted that he couldn't do anything in front of Yonggenzuan. Everyone had underestimated Cheng Gongxing, including himself, who had previously invested in Cheng Gongxing. When he had bet on the Battle of Chiang, it had been Cheng Gongxing who had come to him to discuss cooperation. The Jubao merchants were all betting on Chongxian and Chu Liang. Of course, he knew how amazing it was for Cheng Gongxing to still be so resolute and determined under the light of Yonggenzuan. However, he did attribute his success to Chongxian and Chu Liang's guidance. Yonggenzuan was simply too dazzling. Of course, these things were already in the past, and there was no need to regret it. As someone who had personally developed the Jubao merchants to its current scale, Su Shi had keen insight. In reality, he knew very well that ever since Su Fang had cut open his heart outside the Blue Stone Palace, everything he had done was just a last-ditch struggle. Cheng Gongxing's two moves, be it sending Yonggenzuan to Jixia Academy or using Su Fang as a sword, were both masterpieces. In the cruel struggle for power, even if the Jubao merchants were twice as strong, they were still very weak. Not to mention that he had a sword pointed at his life gate. From that moment on, he had already been thinking of a way out. To give up such a huge business like the Jubao merchants required a terrifying amount of decisiveness, and he had made the decision without hesitation. When the various large chambers of commerce in Qi were sucking blood from the wounds of the Jubao merchants, other than the Four Seas Business Alliance and Cheng Gongxing, most of the profits were actually swallowed by a few smaller chambers of commerce. And behind these smaller chambers of commerce was actually Su Shi himself. He had used his left hand to his right hand to complete the transfer of resources. Of course, in this process, he had unavoidably suffered huge losses. Less than 10% of his profits remained, but he still managed to save some. After that, he pretended to be dead and struggled a lot, but it was just an act before he escaped. Of course, he had indeed used all his strength to struggle. If not, he would not have been able to hide it from Cheng Gongxing and Qing Shi of the Four Seas Business Alliance. Of course, it would be better if he could revive the Jubao merchant. After all, this business itself was an invaluable asset. If he could not, he would have to give up. After that, Chao Xing, who represented Uncle He, withdrew, and all the resistance of the Jubao merchants collapsed. The huge chamber of commerce collapsed almost overnight. Su Shi knew that if he lost the Jubao merchants, he would not be able to protect himself even with his peak outer building strength. Whether it was Chung Gongsheng or Qing Shi, or the other forces that participated in the carving up of the Jubao merchants, no one would let him live. Therefore, he had to make the second move. He had to die, so he had to control the method of death himself. If he wanted to directly kill a top nobleman like Chung Gongsheng, he would not have the chance to do so in Linzi City. Therefore, he turned his attention to Jiang Wang. Jiang Wang, who had returned to Linzi from Linzi City, was undoubtedly a good target. Firstly, he did not have any background, and secondly, he was close friends with Chung Gongsheng. Killing Jiang Wang was to cut off one of Chung Gongsheng's arms. At the same time, he would release some clues that could lead Chung Gongsheng to him. First, he would kill Jiang Wang, then Chung Gongsheng. Then, he would escape with his life from the Zhonggenjia's revenge, and start all over again. This was a very good plan. As long as he changed his identity and used those small chambers of commerce as a foundation, he believed that with his own ability, he might be able to create another Jubao merchants. It was a pity that the Jubao merchants were about to trample the declining Four Seas Business Alliance under their feet. However, they were caught and dismembered in a few moves. If he were to start all over again, he might not have so many opportunities and possibilities. Therefore, his hatred for Chung Gongsheng was unquestionable. However, he did not expect to meet someone from hell. Although he had achieved his main goal of escaping with his life, he did not manage to kill Chung Gongsheng or Jiang Wang. It was really a waste of this death. One had to know that the price of faking one's death was very high. However, this was it. Su Yu had wishful thinking. For a very long time, he did not plan to target Chung Gongsheng. He would not even show any hostility to any of his past enemies. Hatred itself was a kind of trace. He would not leave any trace. He would welcome a brand new beginning with a brand new identity. When he stood at the top again, they would meet again. Jiang Wang rushed to Linzi City alone. His feelings were actually very complicated. He had won first place in the Seven Stars Pavilion's secret realm, and his future path was clear. He could use Qi's resources to become stronger step by step. Moreover, this time, he was going to continue helping Chung Gongsheng. The toughness of the 3 Seven Stars worlds gave him enough confidence in himself. However, when he was still outside of Linzi City, Su Shi took him down a notch and nearly killed him. Death was really a very scary thing. He had experienced the days of lying under the sacrificial table in the temple of Huanzhen, waiting for death. He did not want to experience it again. He did not want to, but he was still easily defeated by Su Shi. The desire to become stronger had never disappeared in Jiang Wang's heart. However, because of this near-death experience, the desire burned even more fiercely. "I will never lie on the ground waiting for death again," he said to himself silently. "Let the sky, the earth, and the wind in the wilderness be the witnesses." Jiang Wang suddenly raised his head. He saw 2 figures in the sky rushing toward him. One was fat, and the other was wearing a black helmet and armor. They were very familiar people. Jiang Wang rose into the sky to block them. "Jiang Wang!" Chung Gongsheng's anxious expression eased. However, the blood vessels in his small eyes could not be wiped away. He looked up and down at Jiang Wang. "Are you okay?" "Almost." Jiang Wang raised his chin. "What are you doing?" "I received news that Su Shi was desperate and wanted to attack you. There were many objections in the family. I could not ask Uncle to help, so I had to come here myself." Chung Gongsheng explained the situation clearly. He narrowed his eyes and asked, "Where is Su Shi? You did not see him?" Chapter 521. Chung Gongsheng's logic was simple. Jiang Wang was definitely not Su Shi's opponent. Since Jiang Wang was fine, it meant that Su Shi hadn't made a move yet. The news he received could be fake. As for the purpose behind this fake news, he quickly began to analyze it. No one dared to underestimate Su Shi, even though he had forced the Jubao merchants into a dead end. As soon as Cheng Gongxing said this, Jiang Wang understood why Cheng Gongxing hadn't shown up. When he was ambushed by Su Shi, he was sure that Cheng Gongxing was smart enough not to be fooled and that he would be able to figure out what was going on. But in the end, he didn't show up. Linzi City was a huge whirlpool. Everyone could be involved in anything they did. He thought that something must have stopped Cheng Gongxing. To deal with someone as powerful as Su Shi, the only card Cheng Gongxing could play was Chongxian Chuliang. However, Chongxian Chuliang had a foothold in the entire Zhanggenjia. Of course, he would spare no effort to protect Cheng Gongxing. Saving Jiang Wang didn't have that much motivation. He had to consider the opinions of his family. No matter how important Jiang Wang was, he was only important to Cheng Gongxing. To the entire Zhanggenjia, he was just a hanger-on. Obviously, the Zhanggenjia strongly opposed Chongxian Chuliang's intervention this time. After failing to communicate with them, Cheng Gongxing simply rushed out of Linzi and brought 14 to save Jiang Wang. Of course, he didn't bring 14 to die with Jiang Wang. He came himself. Chongxian Chuliang had no choice but to come. No one knew what stupid thing Su Shi would do if he was forced into a dead end. He was threatening Chongxian Chuliang with his own safety. Such an irrational action would make him lose a lot of points in front of Chongxian Chuliang. Even his grandfather, Chongxian Yunbo, would have a lower opinion of him, not to mention the elders in his family. "You'll lose a lot of points if you do this," Jiang Wang said. "It doesn't matter." Cheng Gongxing's face was gloomy. "They keep talking about the dignity of the Zhanggenjia. Do they think I don't know?" When Lianmu communicated with them privately. That's why they were so unanimously opposed to it. From the beginning, they only used to beat me. Yonggenzuan Chuliang. A pawn to make him listen to them, even though I've done so much and I've done so well. Jiang Wang understood as soon as he heard this. That's why they watched Su Shi kill me and stopped your uncle from doing anything. Was a good choice Chuliang. They could take a lot of profits from the Jubao merchants, but they didn't have to dirty their hands or worry about Su Shi. Su Shi had killed the man from Deqi's Qingyang town to vent his anger. Naturally, there would be people from Deqi to hunt him down. They didn't have to do anything. They had beaten Yonggenzuan Chuliang for so long. It was time for them to beat Cheng Gongxing Chuliang. After all, Yonggenzuan Chuliang was the future family head they had always wanted. No one in Zhanggenjia Chuliang objected to Yonggenzuan Chuliang being sent to Jixia Academy because it was definitely a good thing for Yonggenzuan's future. As long as Yonggenzuan's forces could withstand Cheng Gongxing's attacks when Yonggenzuan wasn't around, Chuliang would be able to take advantage of Chuliang. When they wanted to use me, they made all kinds of promises and asked me to stand up against Yonggenzuan Chuliang. When they saw that I wasn't going to succeed, they started to suppress me. Cheng Gongxing said hatefully, "Am I, Cheng Gongxing Chuliang, so easy to bully? You want me to watch my only true friend die before my eyes?" He rarely showed his anger on his face, but this time, he really hated Chuliang. "I won't die so easily," Jiang Wang comforted him. "The one who died is Su Shi." Cheng Gongxing glared at him. "If you're not someone who likes to brag, then don't brag. Let's go back to Linzi. This matter might not be over yet. I haven't figured it out yet. Su Shi must have set up a trap. He's really dead. Come with me." Jiang Wang had no choice but to bring them back to the place where they had fought. Cheng Gongxing looked at the headless body and asked doubtfully, "Is it really Su Shi?" Jiang Wang said honestly, "If I remember correctly, he must be Su Shi. How did he die?" Jiang Wang opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but hesitated. Cheng Gongxing glanced at him and said, "My uncle has left." He couldn't help but add, "Looks like this is the real Su Shi." Since Cheng Gengxing had come here to take risks, Chongxian and Chu Liang could only follow. Although he was angry when he said those words earlier, it was not as if he did not intend to let Chongxian and Chu Liang hear it. He wanted to gain sympathy for himself and win more support from Chongxian and Chu Liang within the family. However, Chongxian Chu Liang, who was hiding in the dark, did not express his opinion. When he saw Su Shi's body, he informed Jiang Wang and left quietly. Jiang Wang did not hide anything and directly told him about the Hell of No Door. So I may have to leave Linzi very soon. Don't make a decision yet. Zhongshuan Sheng almost had the words "your brain is not working well" hanging on his face. Let me think about it first. Yin Guan helped you kill Su Shi. Yes. The Hell of No Door's coroner Wang was also involved. And then Yin Guan asked you to help their people sneak into Linzi. That's right. That's good. Cheng Gengxing clapped his hands. It's a good thing that I'm not dead, Jiang Wang said. That's not what I'm talking about. Cheng Gengxing rolled his eyes with difficulty. He directly hit the air with his palm and activated his heavy technique, crushing Su Shi's headless body into meat paste. Then he shouted, 14. There was no need to mention the tacit understanding between him and 14. He decisively swung his heavy sword and slashed with all his strength, creating a few cracks in the official road. After doing all this, Cheng Gengxing said to Jiang Wang, "You got two things wrong." Jiang Wang was not very happy. "I only said two things. First, 14 and I helped you. The three of us worked together to kill Su Shi. Forgive me for being blunt, but the three of us together were no match for him. In front of Su Shi, I had no power to resist at all. Maybe it was my uncle who suppressed him? Or maybe his Taoist heart collapsed because of the failure of the Jubao merchant. The holy tower collapsed, and his strength was not as strong as before." Cheng Gengxing said to himself, "In any case, the three of us not only had the possibility of killing Su Shi, there were many possibilities." At this point, Jiang Wang could completely understand. This was starting to separate the connection between Su Shi's death and Yin Guan. What else could he think? He was not stupid. Just say it. In the end, who did Yin Guan ask to help arrange for their people to enter Linzi? How would I know? Cheng Gengxing was probably not very satisfied with Jiang Wang's quick enlightenment this time. He looked unhappy, but in the end, he still revealed the mystery. It could be Yonggenzuan's people. This was a blatant attempt to frame him. This way, not only would Jiang Wang's promise be fulfilled, but Jiang Wang would also not have to defect and push the blame to Yonggenzuan's subordinates. Meanwhile, Yonggenzuan was still cultivating in Jixia Academy, without a doubt, the so-called subordinate of Yonggenzuan, who arranged for the doorless hell to enter the city, must have secretly sided with Cheng Gengxing. Once this matter was settled, Yonggenzuan's power in Linzi would be in danger. How dangerous it would depend on how big the doorless hell's mess was. It seemed like this was a good thing? From inside to outside, he was taking advantage of everything. Jiang Wang was silent for a while before saying, "I promised Yin Guan that I would contact him within 2 days. There's enough time." Cheng Gengxing was confident. Sigh. Jiang Wang sighed. He had to admit that in terms of strategy, Cheng Gengxing was indeed qualified to look down on him. He composed himself and said, "After we return to the city, send someone to the Bao family's carriage shop and compensate them. The coachman was also implicated by me, so we have to ensure his family's livelihood in the future." This was reasonable. However, Cheng Gengxing was still Cheng Gengxing. He clapped again and said fiercely, "The Bao family dared to cooperate with Su Shi to murder you and leak information about your trip. I will not let them off." Jiang Wang was stunned. He did not intend to hide his tracks when he returned to Linzi. Renting the Bao family's carriage back to Linzi was not a secret, and he could easily find out. Why would he need the Bao family's cooperation? But then again, the Bao family, especially Bao Zhongqing, harbored a grudge against Cheng Gengsheng, so they hit it off with Su Shi. This logic was very reasonable. Moreover, Jiang Wang really did sit in the Bao family's carriage, and something really did happen to him. If they really wanted to make a fuss about this, the Bao family really had no way to explain it. Safety was the biggest problem in a carriage business. If the Bao family did not want Cheng Gengsheng to make a big fuss about this, it was impossible for them not to bleed. In this way, not only would they be able to compensate the coachman's family, but they would also be able to make another profit from the Bao family. Chapter 522. After returning to Linzi, Jiang Wang didn't go anywhere apart from the small welcoming banquet attended by Li Longchuan, Yan Fu, and Gao Zhi. Su Xiangqian's trip to the islands off the coast was a lot quieter. Jiang Wang's reputation in Linzi had skyrocketed after suppressing Lei Zhanqian and winning first place in the 7-star Hidden Realm. However, there were insiders who repeatedly emphasized that Jiang Wang had only gotten lucky and had relied on external forces to catch Lei Zhanqian off guard. Needless to say, these insiders were all related to the Lei clan. Lei Zhanqian wasn't willing to let his reputation become a stepping stone, especially since he was confident that his strength was above Jiang Wang's. However, Jiang Wang didn't care about this since he had already obtained the greatest benefits. His lifespan had been replenished, and he had even obtained the 7-star Sacred Pavilion's secret arts. So what if Lei Zhanqian was making up stories about him? If Lei Zhanqian could make it sound like he had won, then that was his own ability. As long as they didn't come looking for trouble, Jiang Wang couldn't even be bothered to argue. No one had the chance to come looking for trouble because Jiang Wang didn't leave the house at all. He was fully focused on reaching the peak of the soaring dragon realm. His schedule was packed. His efforts in the isolated islands of heaven and earth, and exploring the mist of obscurity, were all foundational tasks. His main focus was the competition for first place in the great illusionary realm and the cultivation of the fire totem. The Void Continent's totemic power was somewhat similar to the Forest Ocean Origin Realm's cultivation system, but their nature was completely different. The sacred race warriors of the Forest Ocean Origin Realm mainly focused on how to store more dragon god power in their bodies and how to use this power. The fundamental increase in strength was still due to the dragon god's blessing. Totemic power was also feedback from the totem origin, but the origin of the Void Continent warriors was pure, unconscious, and a collection of laws. They used totemic power to cleanse themselves and bring themselves closer to the origin, which in turn allowed them to withstand even more totemic power. The foundation of one's strength lay in one's own body, and the totem origin was there for them to take. Jiang Wang wouldn't choose to become a totem spirit like Qing was blazing fire. He only wanted to use the power of the totem to cultivate and explore the corresponding source of the totem. Through the fire totem, he was able to better understand fire. After all, the fire and wood elements were his primary paths of cultivation. After consuming the Skycloud goat and undergoing the quintessence baptism in the Forest Ocean Origin world, his innate talent in the wood element had already surpassed his innate talent in the fire element. It was only because he didn't have a suitable and powerful Tao art that his innate talent in the wood element wasn't that conspicuous. Now it was time to get it back by cultivating the fire totem. Back in the Wuji catacombs, he had already obtained the Fire Origin graphic tome from the Qinghua division. As the representative of the Qinghua tribe in the life and death game, the Qinghua tribe would fulfill his every request. Moreover, Jiang Wang did not need to know the core secrets of the Qinghua division, such as the strongest killing technique of the Qinghua division, or how to create the spirit of Qinghua. The Qinghua division didn't feel burdened at all. After informing Yin Guan of Cheng Gengsheng's arrangement, Jiang Wang no longer had any contact with the people from the Gateless Hell. After burning Yin Guan's long hair, he indeed had no way of contacting Yin Guan. Even Chung Gung Xing didn't know where the people from the Gateless Hell went after entering the city. The fact that the Gateless Hell was able to develop so well despite being wanted by so many countries in the Eastern Divine region meant that their ability to hide their tracks was top-notch. Fortunately, Chung Gung Xing didn't want to know where they went. He even intentionally downplayed this matter and didn't mention it at all. Getting involved with the Gateless Hell at a time like this was undoubtedly a foolish thing to do. The Gateless Hell had its own plans. He was just following along and placing a piece down. Now all he had to do was wait. As for the matter of Linzi, Chung Gung Xing really wasn't boasting. Jiang Wang could cultivate at ease and didn't need his help for the time being. Chung Gung Xing dealt with Wen Lianmu's offensive very well. Moreover, Su Shi's complete elimination this time made the situation much simpler. The tables had turned. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Wang Yiwu was probably going to lose in the competition for business, even with Wen Lianmu's help. At present, everyone was talking about how long Wang Yiwu could last until Yung Genzuan came out of seclusion. He was sitting cross-legged and accumulating his meager totemic power according to the method recorded in the Fire Origin Manual. This process was very slow due to the lack of a good cultivation system on the Void Continent. It was probably impossible for him to reach the same level as the experts on the Void Continent by relying on the Fire Origin Manual. However, Jiang Wang wasn't counting on this to begin with. As he saw it, the fire totemic power itself was an explanation of fire based on the Void Continent's perspective. When a flame burned in front of one's eyes, it was already a manifestation of the laws, a concrete representation. One could see the fire, see its color, and feel its heat, but it was very difficult to discern its essence at a glance. The various fire attribute Tao arts he usually cultivated were all derived from fire and made the laws of fire even more concrete. Deducing the origin of fire from various fire attribute Tao arts was a kind of research perspective. Studying the fire totemic power now was a different kind of perspective. Jumping out of the original framework and investigating the origin from a different perspective was very beneficial. This was especially true for Jiang Wang, who had accumulated a deep understanding of the fire attribute to begin with. Be it the various powerful fire attribute Tao arts he was proficient in or the 8 tones flame sparrow he had invented himself, they were all adding to his fire foundation. It looked like a mountain range from one side and a mountain peak from the other. The distance and height were all different, but they were all mountains. Since he could see the distance and height clearly, he naturally knew the details of the mountains by heart. Under such circumstances, his control of fire improved rapidly. While cultivating, Jiang Wang also diverted a portion of his attention to wait for the matching battle in the Great Illusionary Land. In the previous battle, he defeated the second-ranked cultivator and became the second-ranked cultivator in the Great Illusionary Land. His remaining goal was to be the first. Time flew by as he cultivated. With a thought, Jiang Wang put down his observation of the fire source totem power and focused his attention on the Great Illusionary Land. Matching battle begin. It was finally here. Ever since he was able to battle, he had been fighting hard to be the first. From the Wandering Pulse realm to the Heavenly Ascension realm, he had not been able to achieve his goal. Whether he could become the first in the Soaring Dragon realm depended on this battle. The Sword Discourse Arena met in the Milky Way and became one. Having long been accustomed to the vast Milky Way, Jiang Wang immediately looked at his opponent. Standing in front of him was a familiar face. It was the young man in a luxurious robe whom he had matched with before entering the Seven Stars Pavilion's arcane realm. At that time, Jiang Wang had seized the opportunity to turn the tables. The young man in a luxurious robe's name in the Great Illusionary Land was Ling Yu. It did not seem like his real name. Unlike his previous arrogance, he spoke first this time. "I've been waiting for you for a long time," he said. Jiang Wang was somewhat surprised. "Waiting for me? I've perfected long ago, and can enter the inner mansion at any time. I told myself that I would only wait for you for 5 days. You came on the 5th day." Back then, he could see the arrogance and stubbornness in the young man's eyes. He was definitely a genius. Jiang Wang had experienced the trials of the Seven Stars Pavilion's arcane realm and fought a few battles before he finally reached the perfected stage. However, this young man was one step faster. Indeed, Jiang Wang did not expect him to be so stubborn. Just because he lost by mistake, he deliberately stayed in this realm after perfecting and waited for him for 5 whole days. This was especially so when both of them knew that Jiang Wang had won that battle by luck. For such a genius, 5 days was definitely a huge waste. Jiang Wang could not help but sigh. There's no need to be so stubborn. The young man named Ling Yu shook his head. "I shouldn't have lost." Jiang Wang did not know why, but he wanted to persuade him. "Winning and losing are common in battles. I've lost before." The young man in a luxurious robe glanced at him. "You don't understand. I shouldn't have lost." At this point, he seemed to feel that he had said too much. So he spread his hands. "Let's fight." Chapter 523. Jiang Wang didn't think that there was anyone in this world who shouldn't lose. There was always someone better than the strong. There was always someone better than you. Those who stood at the top still had to look up at the sky. The young man in the luxurious robe said it so matter-of-factly. It seemed that he really had a reason to not lose. But Jiang Wang didn't want to lose. Once the battle horn was played, Chang Xiangxi was already out of its scabbard. Because it was so fast, it looked like it happened at the same time. Just as Ling Yu finished speaking, the sword was already close to his throat. A drop of water fell. This clear process ended ingeniously. The drop of water happened to fall on the tip of the sword. Jiang Wang's hand sank. It was just a drop of water, but it was like a river. This was the heavy water technique that was far superior to Tian He's. With Chum Gungxing's current strength, he might not be able to achieve such an effect even with the heavy water technique. Chang Xiangxi fell straight down. Jiang Wang fixed his wrist. The tip of the sword turned sideways, so the river turned upside down and the water droplets flew. Jiang Wang directly pulled the sword horizontally. It was an endless and elegant style. Famous scholars' downfall sword. At the same time, an extremely gorgeous blue robe appeared on Ling Yu's body. It flowed like water and rippled like waves. It made him look like an emperor in the water. The tip of the sword slashed across the blue robe. Although it cut through the robe, it didn't hurt Ling Yu. In the last time they fought, this move, famous scholar's downfall, and this blue Taoist robe, had never appeared. Both of them were a little surprised, but their confidence didn't waver. The drop of water that was slashed by the tip of the sword fell to the ground with a plop sound. It instantly exploded and surged into a river. Ling Yu directly raised his hand. The turbulent water gushed out from his palm. It was mighty and powerful. Jiang Wang, who was already close to him, was pushed back. It was connected to the river on the ground. In 2 breaths' time, it covered the entire sword conference ground. It was the water cage again. Last time, he used this almost unbeatable move to force Jiang Wang into a corner. This time, he used the same move. His desire to win was terrifyingly strong. Last time, it had taken him 3 breaths to cover the entire sword discourse arena, but this time, it only took him 2 breaths. 4 Dao techniques of this level, shortening the time by 1 breath was a huge improvement. Jiang Wang was covered by the water again. And the water pressure was getting stronger and stronger, as if they were in the deep sea. The silver-white ball reappeared in the water. Jiang Wang also chose to use a circular sword to protect himself. after the tempering he had undergone in the forest ocean origin realm, he had already mastered the complete circle sword, and his ability to withstand pressure was on a completely different level from before. However, the luxurious robed youth had also become stronger. The water pressure had suddenly increased to a terrifying level, so he was still unable to hold on for too long. Jiang Wang made a hand seal with one hand and used jealous fire again. He stirred up the emotions of the luxurious robed youth and made him jealous. However, since he had been waiting for Jiang Wang to fight again, he naturally had already targeted this Taoist technique. A whirlpool appeared in his eyes. All the emotions that had been stirred up by the Tao technique jealousy were sucked away by the whirlpool as soon as they appeared. However, with Jiang Wang's fighting talent, how could he expect jealous fire to succeed a second time? He had never been the type to place his hopes on his opponent. Thus, he had only used this technique to draw out the luxurious robed youth's response. Jealous fire was still burning, and the circular sword was still there. However, at this moment, hundreds of black snakes suddenly burrowed into the luxurious robed youth's transcendent palace. This was a Taoist technique that Jiang Wang had personally experienced from the forest ocean origin realm's hidden Snake King. After analyzing it on his own, he had then used the Tao development platform to strengthen it. It was a Taoist technique that completely affected the soul. It was known as the Soul Snake Concealment Technique. He had made a plan from the very beginning. He wouldn't fight the luxurious robed youth in terms of Taoist techniques or even physical strength. Instead, he would directly drag the battle into the soul. Even though he entered the great illusionary realm through his consciousness, it was a complete reflection of reality. In other words, he had both a physical body and a soul. During the last battle, Jiang Wang had already discovered that emotions were the luxurious robed youth's weakness. No matter how much he strengthened himself, no matter how much of a genius he was, he would at most be able to defend himself against emotion-related Taoist technique. Soul Taoist techniques, on the other hand, were a completely new battlefield. After overcoming the red makeup mirror flying snow tribulation, Jiang Wang was confident in the strength of his own soul. However, before the appearance of the Soul Snake Concealment Technique, Jiang Wang couldn't engage in a battle on the soul level unless he was invaded and fought on his home turf. Now, he had the ability to invade another person's soul. In a battle on the soul level, the invader would always have to endure greater pressure because they would also have to constantly resist the rejection of the other party's transcendent palace. Thus, Jiang Wang was in a hurry. The limit of his current control was 300 black snake. Thus, he activated 300 at once. 300 black snakes surged in at high speed, intent on devouring someone. At this moment, a small blue flood dragon leaped down from the roof of the luxurious-looking transcendent palace and roared loudly. It actually forced the black snakes to retreat. This was the luxurious robed youth's Taoist true spirit. It actually possessed the power of the soul and could already protect its own transcendent palace. The blue flood dragon's body grew rapidly. The youth in luxurious robes formed by his soul stood on top of the blue flood dragon's head, looking down at the black snakes. The black snakes were hesitant, suppressed by the transcendent palace and the blue flood dragon, trembling. This was because they were fighting in a foreign land, and were suppressed by their cultivation level. The blue flood dragon swooped down, turning a dozen black snakes into smoke with a swipe of its claws. It pounced left and right, wantonly killing. However, at this moment, one of the black snakes suddenly leaped out and transformed into Jiang Wang's figure. He personally used the Soul Snake Concealment Technique as a medium to enter someone else's transcendent palace with the power of his soul. In the modern world, he might not have dared to try this. Because the soul was very weak, rashly entering the opponent's home turf was very similar to suicide. However, in the great illusionary realm, there was no harm in understanding this kind of battle in advance. The modern world was boundless, and there were all kinds of cultivation methods and secret technique. There were so many that they surpassed the stars in the sky. There was no telling when they would run into each other. Perhaps this kind of unbridled attempt was the greatest meaning of fighting in the great illusionary realm. The luxurious robed youth's transcendent palace was completely different from Jiang Wang's own transcendent palace, not only in terms of style. Now was not the time to study this. When Jiang Wangxian transformed into his human form, he immediately felt an omnipresent pressure. This place did not welcome him. It was silently expelling him. Not only was his soul expelled, but outside of his soul, the circle sword was unable to buy him too much time under the terrifying water pressure. He could not delay for too long. Jiang Wang had already made up his mind. With a wave of his hand, flowers of soul power flew out, instantly spreading out into a sea of soul flowers. The luxurious robed youth, standing on the blue flood dragon, was clearly stunned. Soon after, he and the blue flood dragon were surrounded by the sea of soul flowers in his own transcendent palace. As for Jiang Wang, he immediately complied with the omnipresent rejection and directly withdrew from the transcendent palace. With the circle sword, Jiang Wang erupted with a resplendent sword, breaking through the temporarily uncontrolled water flow and shooting straight at his opponent. He did not expect to be able to defeat the luxurious robed youth in his transcendent palace with soul Dao technique. What he wanted was only this encirclement on the soul level. He wanted to use the advantage of the soul battlefield to guide the victory of the external battlefield. The omnipresent water and increasing water pressure were indeed almost unsolvable problems, but when it went out of control, breaking through it would only require a very short burst of power. When the sword reached his forehead, the luxurious robed youth suddenly opened his eyes. "I've lost," he said. At the same time, the water covering the sword discourse arena receded, surging back into his palm. Thus the tip of the sword stopped. Chapter 524. When Jiang Wang was the first to open up a battlefield of souls, the youth in luxurious robes had two choices. One was to ignore everything and see whether he crushed Jiang Wang first, or if his soul was destroyed by Jiang Wang first. The second was to fight another battlefield at the same time. Perhaps out of self-confidence, or perhaps out of a desire for a perfect victory, he chose the latter. This choice couldn't be called wrong, because neither of them could be sure which battlefield would end first. Jiang Wang was willing to gamble, but he wasn't, that was all. In the extremely short time Jiang Wang had decisively arrived with his sword, he had also swiftly swept away the sea of souls that Jiang Wang had left in his heavenly palace. If he had been a breath faster, then the outcome would still be uncertain. Unfortunately, he didn't have that time. "I want to ask, why did I lose?" The youth in luxurious robes looked at Jiang Wang and asked. It had to be said that although this youth seemed to be an arrogant fellow, this question was very simple. They were all competitors, so who would be willing to talk so deeply? But for some reason, perhaps because of the genuine confusion in his eyes, he had a very good impression of him. Indeed, objectively speaking, no matter how one compared him, his strength was not inferior to Jiang Wang's. Jiang Wang thought for a moment, then said, "I want to ask you first. In your heavenly palace, when I used the Sea of Souls, you seemed to be stunned for a moment. Can I ask why?" The youth in luxurious robes shook his head. "I don't want to say." Was this the attitude of asking for advice? Jiang Wang put away his sword. Somniferous longing was not reflected in the great illusionary realm. This ordinary weapon in the great illusionary realm was not very suitable for him, so it couldn't maximize his swordsmanship. But if they were fighting in reality, this youth in luxurious robes, who looked like he came from a wealthy family, would definitely be able to use more treasures and magical artifacts. Jiang Wang shook his head, not minding the youth's attitude. he asked directly. Have you ever encountered danger? I mean, the kind of danger where you might really die. The youth in luxurious robes thought for a moment, then said, Never. It seems that you come from a very illustrious clan, and you're very favored, Jiang Wang casually analyzed. This has nothing to do with our victory or defeat. He was a little wary. It was inevitable that the disciples of prestigious families would be fawned upon by others, so it was normal for them to be vigilant. Jiang Wang had seen many different kinds of people, but among the young masters he knew, none of them were as stiff as the one in front of him. Just like those youths who remembered the words of their elders and then tried to force them to do so. It was easy for him to offend people, and he was very inexperienced. Jiang Wang suddenly realized that his mentality seemed to be too mature. He was obviously not much older than the young man in front of him, but he looked at him as if he was looking at a child. Thinking of this, he smiled and said, What I mean is that you may lack experience in fighting. I'm not talking about the battles in the great illusionary realm. The battle here was very real, but it was not real after all. Because here, you won't really die. The luxurious robed youth fell into deep thought. This was a very stubborn young man. Jiang Wang had already experienced this before, so he had no choice but to add, I'm not suggesting that you try to fight to the death. On the path of cultivation, there are countless geniuses who die prematurely. Your family can help you avoid danger, and this is definitely a good thing. Cultivating steadily and moving forward step by step is the path that disciples of prestigious families like you should take. I know. The luxurious robed youth nodded. Thank you. Jiang Wang then gestured with his right hand, indicating that he could leave the arena. No matter what this person's family background was like, he really had no intention of fawning over them. It was just that this young man had asked sincerely, so he could only answer sincerely. He didn't care about increasing the difficulty of his inner palace-level battles in the great illusionary realm. Becoming stronger should always be done through one's own efforts, and not by dragging others down. The luxurious robed youth didn't leave just like that. He was a bit bashful, but he still asked, What's your name? It was probably because Jiang Wang's frank attitude made him lower his guard. He wanted to make friends, but he didn't have much experience and didn't know how to make friends, so he seemed very abrupt. Dugawudi, Jiang Wang said. I'm not asking about that. Real name, the luxurious robed youth said. Jiang Wang said casually, Zhang Linchuan. The luxurious robed youth seemed a bit angry. If you don't want to say it, then forget it. Jiang Wang was a bit surprised. He used the name Zhang Linchuan to dominate the world, but this was the first time someone had seen through him. Originally, he really had just said it perfunctorily. Although he was about the same age as this youth, he was much more mature. He didn't need to open his heart with just a few words. Moreover, although this youth gave people the impression of being arrogant and powerful for the first time, it was probably because he was well protected that he was actually very simple on the inside. The other side of being simple was that he should be very easy to fool. However, he didn't expect that although he was simple, he was actually very sharp. He saw through Jiang Wang's perfunctory words at a glance. Jiang Wang helplessly pressed his forehead. How should I explain it to you? We're in the great illusionary realm, you know? No one knows who else is in the modern world. Revealing one's true identity is a very risky thing to do. We've only fought twice, so we're not familiar with each other at all. Do you understand what I'm saying? The gorgeous robed youth had little experience and didn't know much about the ways of the world, but he was undoubtedly a very smart youth. As soon as he heard Jiang Wang say this, he immediately said, Sorry, I was rude and forgot to introduce myself first. I forgot that this is the great illusionary realm. No one knows who I am. So there was no one in the modern world who didn't know who he was? Jiang Wang suddenly thought of the time when he hadn't known Cheng Gungxing for long. That guy had accidentally used a heavy technique in a battle and had insisted that he keep it a secret. He was also very confident in his family's name. He had an attitude that said, "Who in the world doesn't know who I am? These disciples of famous sects." But then again, coming from a famous sect, they did have the right to be arrogant. "My name is Zhuo Guangshu," said the gorgeous robed youth. "Ah, hello. I've heard a lot about you. Nice to meet you." Jiang Wang smoothly said some perfunctory words, but he suddenly realized something. He asked tentatively, "Do you know Zhuo Guanglie?" Zhuo Guangshu's expression suddenly turned cold. "It seems that he really is very famous. So what's your relationship with him? Is it convenient for you to say?" asked Jiang Wang. Zhuo Guanglie was a person he couldn't avoid on his path of cultivation. Although he was dead, the light he left behind was still helping him to illuminate the path ahead. "He's my elder brother. That's all." Zhuo Guangshu's attitude was already very cold. Probably only because of his upbringing, he still answered. "What about you? Friends? Enemies?" Jiang Wang's heart skipped a beat. He roughly understood why Zhuo Guangshu was stunned when he saw the divine spirit flame flower in the heavenly palace. The flame flower Taoist technique was originally created by Zhuo Guanglie's genius, and his divine spirit flame flower basically copied the idea of the flame flower. Of course, Zhuo Guangshu recognized it. But, elder brother, and that's all, these two sentences really didn't match. The relationship between the two brothers didn't seem to be very good. "Of course he's not an enemy. I respect him very much," Jiang Wang said frankly. "My name is Jiang Wang." "Is that so?" Zhuo Guangshu said coldly. "Unfortunately, I don't want to know you anymore." He seemed to be very offended that Jiang Wang only introduced himself after hearing about his relationship with Zhuo Guanglie. His rare desire to make friends seemed to have been extinguished. Without even saying goodbye, he left. The sword discourse arena split up and returned to their respective sword discourse arenas, sending the two back. Jiang Wang was stunned. He wasn't angry at Zhuo Guangshu's lack of manners. This was just a somewhat childish youth. He probably didn't have any bad intentions. He just suddenly remembered the meridian unlocking pill he took. The meridian unlocking pill that Zhao Ruqing said was very rare. Even someone as strong as Zhuo Guanglie had died, his body and soul destroyed, his flesh turned to mush, and all the treasures on his body shattered. Only a single pill was left. Could it be that pills were more durable than artifacts and treasures, and were less likely to be destroyed? The only explanation was that Zhuo Guanglie subconsciously protected it at the last moment of his life. The scene of Zhuo Guanglie opening the mouth of the broken bottle and seeing the meridian unlocking pill. Thinking about it now, it was still so clear. At that time, he had regained control of his fate, and when Zhuo Guanglie was at the end of his life, he still used all his strength to protect that meridian unlocking pill. Was it left for this youth? Chapter 525. Dugu Wudi is ranked first in the 6 directions. Honorable name: Great Void's strongest soaring dragon. First time achieving this name. Reward: 1,000 merit points and 1,000 technique. Maintain this name. Reward: 100 merit points and 100 techniques in the middle of each month. Possess this name. Add another layer to the Dao development platform. At first glance, there was no difference between the honorable name and the honorable name of the 6 directions cultivator. The only difference was the number of merit points and technique. However, the most important thing was the last reward. It emphasized the word possess. The honorable name of the 6 directions cultivator was, maintain this name. Add another layer to the Dao development platform. The value of possess and maintain were completely different. When Jiang Wang advanced to the inner mansion realm, the honorable name of the 6 directions cultivator would disappear. This was because he was no longer in the period of maintaining this name. On the other hand, the honorable name of the Great Void's strongest soaring dragon would continue. As long as he had the honorable name of the Great Void's strongest soaring dragon, the Tao development platform's effect would increase by 1 layer at any time. During this period of time, he had not contributed any merit points to the Tao development platform. Thus, his techniques had not improved at all. Coupled with the techniques rewarded this time, he had jumped to 2,235 merit points. He was still far away from the 10,000 merit points needed to advance to the 3rd layer of the Tao development platform. However, because his Great Void illusory realm had been left behind by Zhuguanglie, he only needed to use 30% of his contribution points, which was 3,000 merit points, to unlock it. Jiang Wang was only a few hundred merit points away. He could not help but be tempted. However, because of the overlapping of the 2 honorable names, he could now use the Tao development platform. The effect had increased by 2 layers, and he had already reached the 4th layer. At this moment, beside Duguwudi's name on the sundial in his blessed land, in addition to the number of merit and magic he had accumulated, there were also records of his glorious titles, such as Great Void's strongest soaring dragon and Great Void's 6 directions cultivator. It seemed rather complacent. However, Jiang Wang had second thoughts. If Zhuguanglie had still been around, there might have been too many honorable names on the Tao development platform. After he had taken over, he had been demoted from the 23rd layer of the Blessed Land to the 36th layer of the Blessed Land. There was nothing to be proud of. After experiencing so many things, Jiang Wang was used to digging deeper when considering problems. Putting aside his own gains, looking back at the Great Illusionary Realm itself, the rules of the Great Illusionary Realm greatly encouraged the strong, and the strong would always be strong. From the setting of the honor of strongest soaring dragon of the Grand Void, Jiang Wang also vaguely sensed that the Grand Void Land was implementing a rather fair honor system. As for the benefits of this honor system, just look at the list of famous weapons arranged by the various countries. Only the name and the weapon could not be faked. To a certain extent, the famous weapon chart was a ranking of influence. It was just that the current famous weapon charts of the various countries lacked sufficient persuasiveness. If the reputation of the Great Illusionary Realm could be promoted, and the Great Illusionary Realm was made public one day, it would immediately have a stronger influence. However, if the Great Illusionary Land were to be expanded to include all cultivators, the impact it would have on the real world would be too terrifying. Which of those in power would agree to it? None of the current overlords would be willing to see an influence that transcended countries and sections. For the Great Illusionary Realm to be able to exist, it had already gone through countless battles, and its expansion was bound to not be that easy. This was probably also the reason why Cheng Gengxing had long said that the Great Illusionary Realm might open up a new space, but there had been no movement until now. However, these matters were not for Jiang Wang to worry about. At least for now, he was enjoying the benefits, and it was not necessarily impossible for him to enjoy more in the future. As for matters of a higher level, since he could not reach them even if he jumped up, he would let those of a higher level worry about it. The battle with Zhuguangshu could be considered the first time he had decided the outcome of a battle at the level of the soul, and it had greatly benefited Jiang Wang. The only thing was that after seeing the blue flood dragon in Zhuguangshu's heavenly palace, and then looking at the star-twining python that only knew how to hang in the starry river vortex in his heavenly palace all day long, Jiang Wang could not help but feel that it was a little unpleasant to the eye. The star-twining python had indeed displayed a certain level of spirituality, but compared to the blue flood dragon that could directly participate in the battle of the soul, it was clearly far inferior. Perhaps another advancement was needed, but the advancement of the Tao Vein True Spirit could not be rushed. This was a long process of tempering. However, this time, taking the initiative to attack Zhuo Guangshu's heavenly palace with the power of the soul, Jiang Wang understood some things. For example, why did Jiang Yan hide in the netherworld candle all day long? Presumably, it was because of the ubiquitous rejection of the heavenly palace. It seemed that the netherworld candle, which could easily settle down in his heavenly palace, was more precious than he had imagined. Reviewing the entire battle with Zhuo Guangshu, every detail was worth studying repeatedly. Although he had defeated Zhuo Guangshu again, he could not underestimate Zhuo Guangshu's power. As he had said, the only place where Zhuo Guangshu lost was probably only the battle instinct accumulated from countless life and death battles. Being trapped in the water cage twice and feeling the omnipresent water, every bit of water elemental energy carried out Zhuo Guangshu's will. Jiang Wang had never directly broken through the water cage, but personally experienced the meticulous control of the water elemental energy, which was a great inspiration to Jiang Wang himself. In particular, the practice of the fire origin diagram had deepened his understanding of fire day by day. This kind of understanding would also be reflected in his battle strength. Zhuo Guangshu's control of the water elemental energy could be said to be perfect. Before knowing his identity, Jiang Wang would have believed that he was a member of the Water Clan. After knowing his identity, it wasn't surprising that he could have such control over himself. After all, he was the younger brother of Zhuo Guanglie of Tianjiao. It was normal for him to be a genius, but it was more surprising for him to be mediocre. Thinking of this, Jiang Wang suddenly froze. He remembered that Zhuo Guangshu had said at the beginning, "I shouldn't have lost." Suddenly, he could understand this sentence. As Zhuo Guanglie's younger brother, it was inevitable that he would be compared to Zhuo Guanglie in all aspects. Of course, he should not have lost. Under the dazzling light of Zhuo Guanglie, he must have endured enormous pressure. And now that Zhuo Guanglie was dead, the Zhuo clan, as a famous clan of Chu, urgently needed to promote new geniuses to show that the clan had not declined. Therefore, Zhuo Guangshu should not have lost. He indeed had a reason to not lose to anyone of the same level. After a day of cultivation, when he found Cheng Gengxing, he was giving orders to a few subordinates. It was nothing more than some measures to attack Yonggenzuan's businesses. These could be considered confidential, but the 14 guarding the door would definitely not stop him. "You're here." Cheng Gengxing glanced at Jiang Wang and waved his hand, indicating for the others to leave. Then, he asked, "First place?" He knew of Jiang Wang's progress in the great illusionary realm. With his strength, he could also fight for the honor of being a cultivator of the great illusionary realm. But firstly, he did not have that much time to allocate to the battles in the great illusionary realm. It was already very difficult to ensure the advancement of his cultivation while also personally controlling his businesses and fighting a battle of wits and courage with his opponents. Secondly, he himself had the need to hide his identity and strength in the great illusionary realm. Thirdly, the great illusionary realm was actually not that important to him. Zhenggenjia's secret treasures were enough to dazzle his eyes. The value of the Tao development platform to a disciple of a famous clan like him would be greatly reduced. Moreover, with Zhenggenjia's collection and filling, the level of his Tao development platform was definitely above that of Jiang Wang's. He cared even less about the honor and the rewards. In other words, he often practiced in the sword discourse arena to maintain his sharpness in battle. Yes. Jiang Wang casually found a place to sit down. There was nothing to brag about. He was not Su Xiangqian. "Keep it up," Cheng Gengxing said. "The great illusionary realm may be more important than I thought." "Did you get any more news?" Jiang Wang asked. "I can't be sure, but there's no harm in keeping it up." Cheng Gengxing had said a long time ago that the great illusionary realm might expand, but it still hadn't happened. After all, he still hadn't grasped the highest authority of the Zhenggenjia. he probably didn't have the qualifications to participate in news related to the existence of the Great Illusionary Realm. It seems that Wang Yiwu didn't participate in the Great Illusionary Realm, Cheng Gengxing said again. This was their consensus. With Wang Yiwu's strength, it was impossible for him not to be at the top of the soaring dragon realm in the Great Illusionary Realm. Jiang Wang had fought his way up, but had never encountered him. Jiang Wang nodded as he thought. For people like Wang Yiwu and Li Longchuan, who had both strength and background, the value of the Great Illusionary Realm really wasn't that great. It was understandable that they didn't participate in it at all. Then why were there so many experts flocking to the Blessed Land Challenge every month? That Confucian expert had made ample preparations and cultivated the ancient virtuous 9 swords before initiating the challenge. Could it be that he only wanted to challenge Zhuo Guanglie? Perhaps the Great Illusionary Realm had another level of benefit for those experts who could compete for the Blessed Land Challenge. However, Cheng Gengxing didn't know anything about the Blessed Land Challenge. Perhaps the answer would only be revealed after he actually won the Blessed Land Challenge. At this moment, Cheng Gengxing stood up from his huge chair. Let's go. I'll help you wipe your ass. The matter of the doorless hell had already been dealt with. He was referring to the hidden dangers left behind by Jiang Wang's trip to the 7-star pavilion's secret realm. It was true that Tian Chong had concealed his complete victory on planet Yin and Tian Anping hadn't found out about it. However, Cheng Gengxing was able to find traces of Wen Lianmu's arrangements from the information he had obtained before the 7-star pavilion's secret realm began. Especially after Jiang Wang's departure, when Lianmu had attempted to mobilize the Jubao merchants' greatest counterattack before their collapse. They had joined forces to flatten Cheng Gengxing's businesses in one fell swoop. Cheng Gengxing didn't believe that he hadn't been the one to release the information. Fortunately, Su Shi had collapsed early, causing Wen Lianmu's plan to suffer a huge setback. Moreover, they had fought each other, which prevented Cheng Gengxing from suffering any serious setbacks. However, it could be seen from this matter that Wen Lianmu had probably discovered through some unknown means that Jiang Wang's lifespan was limited. Once Jiang Wang completed the inner palace god art, Wen Lianmu would definitely know that he had gained something from the 7-star pavilion's secret realm. If Tian Anping knew about this, even Cheng Gengxing didn't want to provoke that kind of lunatic. Thus, he had been busy covering up this matter for the past few days. He was only one step away. Jiang Wang rolled his eyes, but couldn't be bothered to bicker with him. They walked out of the room together. Chapter 526. Cheng Gengxing's method of cleaning up the mess was simple and effective. That was to find a reasonable reason for Jiang Wang's lifespan to be fulfilled. Cheng Gengxing was very efficient. He quickly selected a singing and selling event. Singing and selling were generally divided into official selling and charity selling. The former was usually auctioned by the government to subsidize the government's income. The latter was usually used to collect money for disaster relief. Furthermore, the state of cheese business was prosperous, and trading was very popular. Commercial selling was held purely for profit and was despised by some old-fashioned Confucians and legalists. However, it was the appearance of commercial selling that made singing and selling really popular. Using profits to drive people away was the essence of the business. There was a saying, if you don't sing 3 times, the price should be higher. If you don't compete after 3 times, the price won't infringe. 1. This was the rule of singing and selling, which was also the origin of the name, singing and selling. As long as you didn't sing 3 times, you could increase the price to participate in the transaction. After 3 times, the transaction was completed. The organizer of this singing and selling event was Baibao Pavilion. Their headquarters was in the offshore islands. It was said that they had many branches in many places. They mainly sold all kinds of treasures and also did singing and selling business. In Qi, singing and selling events under the Four Seas Business Alliance and even Jiubao merchants were much more powerful than Baibao Pavilion. However, Cheng Gengxing chose Baibao Pavilion because it didn't belong to the two above. His tricks were also less likely to be discovered. Cheng Gengxing's operation was very simple. He sent people to disguise themselves and sell longevity treasures in Baibao pavilions, singing and selling. Of course, it was fake, but the fake was very real. At least, it was hard to tell just by looking at the appearance. Then, he would buy it during the singing and selling. He would use the non-existent longevity treasures to fulfill Jiang Wang's lifespan. Baibao Pavilion would take a large sum of money from this transaction. However, it was worth it in exchange for peace on Tian Anping's side. Furthermore, Cheng Gengxing had just extorted a large sum of money from the Bao family, so he didn't really care about this. Throughout the entire process, the buyer was real, the seller was real, and the transaction process was also real. Only the item being sold was fake. The 100 Treasure Pavilion was more than happy to have a treasure that could extend one's lifespan. Not only could it raise the level of singing, but they could also gain something from it. Jiang Wang and Cheng Gengxing sat in a private room and observed the items being sold through a huge water moon mirror. For big customers, like them who were rich and powerful, Jiubao Pavilion had people guarding the door to help them participate in the sales at any time. The water moon mirror was an artifact used to reflect distant scenes. Because of its level, it was easily interfered with by Taoist techniques, so it was not very useful in battle. However, as a small object in life, it was still very useful. They were usually very small in size. For such artifacts, the larger they were, the harder it was to maintain their clarity, and the more expensive they were. The effect was similar to the red makeup mirror, but there was a world of difference in terms of level. At least, he had never been disturbed when using the red makeup mirror. The person in charge of the singing was a beauty invited from 3 fragrant brothel. The 4 famous brothels would not easily allow their beauties to appear in public. The price for them to appear in public was very expensive. 3 fragrant brothel was not cheap either, but its reputation was indeed weaker in Qi. It was probably because they used this kind of activity to display their beauties. In comparison, it seemed a little low-end, but there was no other way. In order to prevent people from competing at all costs, they increased their expenses. Cheng Gengxing's fake longevity treasure was the most common one in the market. Those who had the ability to buy longevity treasures had basically already used them, so they could not sing at a high price. The only thing that was ignored was the life-nourishing pill and longevity fruit that Jiang Wang had consumed. It was tailor-made for Jiang Wang's needs. The 100 Treasure Pavilion was located in the coastal islands. There were many strange things. However, there were very few things that were valuable to Jiang Wang at his current level. The items were sold one by one. Jiang Wang only sold a few very rare secret techniques. He spent less than 500 Dao origin stones. Of course, it was Cheng Gengxing who paid for them. This Dao technique is not worth this much. It's much more expensive, Cheng Gengxing said. Jiang Wang intended to collect these secret techniques to complete the unsealing of the 3 levels of the Dao platform. He said casually, "The singing will inevitably raise the price." No. Cheng Gengxing shook his head. It exceeds their value by too much. Besides being rare, these secret techniques have no power to speak of. He concluded, "It's possible that more and more people know about the Great Illusionary Realm. Besides the Great Illusionary Realm's Dao platform, he really could not think of any other place that would need this kind of secret technique. For example, a Dao technique that could turn water red was simply crazy. Did the creator pretend to vomit blood at any time so that he could conveniently? This kind of Dao technique was something that would definitely be eliminated. Now, it had appeared openly in the singing event. There were even people bidding for it. Jiang Wang wanted it because of the Dao platform. What about the others? Cheng Gongxing saw the big picture from the small. When the needs of the great illusionary realm affected the real world, perhaps the day when the great illusionary realm was completely opened was not far away. At this time, the attendant in charge of their private room knocked on the door. "Young master, the item that you need to pay attention to has already been sold." It was the longevity treasure that Cheng Gongxing had arranged, the 7 tassels flower. They had already seen it from the water-moon mirror. Cheng Gongxing only waved his hand. "No matter how much others bid, I will pay an extra 1,000 Dao origin stones." The attendant of the 100 Treasures Pavilion was used to seeing extravagance, but he was also shocked by this spending. He was stunned for a moment before retreating. 20,000 Dao origin stones. 21,000 Dao origin stones. 30,000. 30,000 Dao origin stones. 31,000 Dao origin stones. The honored guest of the Sky First Room did not hesitate to raise the price again. 50,000 Dao origin stones. Heavens, 51,000. Legend has it that the 7 tassels flower blooms 7 autumns and bears fruit 8 years of spring. I wonder who will be able to pluck this beauty. Let us wait and see. The voice of the beauty of the 3 fragrances pavilion resounded in the room through the sound transmission stone, and her beauty was reflected in the water-moon mirror. The 7 tassels flower was placed in a crystal bottle. Not only would it not affect one's observation, it would also preserve its medicinal effects very well. It was bright yellow and full of vitality. This time, the standards of the auction were not very high. It was just that the existence of the longevity treasure, the 7 tassels flower, might attract some rich customers. Cheng Gongxing naturally occupied the Sky First Room, and was extremely rich and imposing. After a while, the attendant wiped his sweat and knocked on the door. "Young master, it's already 200,000 Dao origin stones. Do you still want to add?" Cheng Gongxing acted extremely rich and imposing. "Did I set an upper limit for you?" "I understand." The attendant hurriedly lowered his head and left. The 100 Treasures Pavilion did not know that the 7 tassels flower was fake, except for the master who had been bribed by Cheng Gongxing and was in charge of appraising the 7 tassels flower. To him, the risk was not high because this fake would not have a victim. The 7 tassels flower had a nice name, but it was actually a longevity medicine cultivated in the East King Valley's herb garden. Its effects were very ordinary. Its current reputation was all due to the East King Valley's good publicity. The flower blooms in 7 autumns and takes 8 years of spring, was said beautifully, but it had indeed become one of the East King Valley's biggest sources of income. 200,000 Dao origin stones had already exceeded the value of the 7 tassels flower by a lot, so the attendant of the 100 Treasures Pavilion came to remind him. Of course, the 100 Treasures Pavilion wanted to earn more money, but it also depended on who the target was. Although it was wonderful to take advantage of the young masters' wallets, they were afraid that these young masters would not be happy about it and cause trouble instead. Therefore, people who had been doing business for a long time knew when to stop. However, since they had already reminded Cheng Gongxing, and he still insisted on competing in wealth, they could not be blamed anymore. P.S. One said that this sentence came from the Law of 10 Friends, but I did not find the full text of the Law of 10 Friends, so I can't be sure if it's true or not. However, in the Zen Garden Clear Rules of the Northern Song Dynasty, there was a rule of singing clothes, which was to sing and sell monk robes. It could be seen that auctions existed in ancient China, and it was not out of place for it to appear in ancient novels. Qixin was a fictional world, and I wrote a non-historical textual criticism, so I did not spend too much time on textual criticism. Chapter 527. No matter what the other people bid, they would add 1,000 Dao origin stones. Such extravagance was enough to defeat the majority of the competitors. Chung Gung-shing used this strategy to dissuade other people who might be interested in the 7 spike flower. When the bid reached 301,000 Tao origin stones, the voice of the attendant outside the door suddenly sounded, "Hey, young Master Bao, don't." Bang! The door was kicked open, and Bao Zhongqing strode into the room. "Damn fatty, I knew it was you." The attendant of 100 Treasures Pavilion had purposely called out his identity in advance to give Chung Gung-shing time to react. They couldn't stop Bao Zhongqing, so they could only remind him. However, Chung Gung-shing didn't have any reaction. He still leaned lazily on the soft chair, not even bothering to move. He only raised his hand. "Hello, pockmarked Bao." Bao Zhongqing was angry. "Are you purposely picking on me? Did you know I was here? Are you trying to disgust me? Are you purposely raising the price?" Behind him were old acquaintances, Yan Er and the twin demons of Pingxi. They had probably improved in this period of time. When they entered the room, they saw Jiang Wang and were eager to avenge their previous humiliation. Jiang Wang was still pondering the matter of the Dao development stage. He didn't have time to deal with this farce. He casually flicked a flame flower. The flame flower silently exploded in the air, but the flames didn't dissipate. Instead, they intertwined and turned into a flame sparrow. The delicate flame sparrow flapped its wings and landed on Jiang Wang's outstretched finger. It lowered its head and stroked its feathers. Jiang Wang grabbed the flame sparrow and extinguished it in his palm. Yan Er and the twin demons of Pingxi immediately retracted their gazes. They lowered their heads and appeared very obedient. Jiang Wang's display of control over fire element Dao techniques was too shocking. They were improving, but Jiang Wang's improvement was even more terrifying. Back then, outside the Sunset Mountain Villa, they could still exchange a few blows with Jiang Wang. Now, they probably didn't have the qualifications to fight. Before he explored the fire totem and studied the fire origin diagram, Jiang Wang indeed did not have such a level of control. The battle with Zhuo Guangshu had given him a lot of inspiration. However, he was just trying to avoid trouble. He had already slapped Bao Zhongqing's face, so he had no motivation to do it again. After revealing such a move, he continued to ponder. A few hundred Dao origin stones were smashed down, but the secret technique that was exchanged for only 65 Dao origin stones, raising the total to 2,300. However, leaving aside their rarity, the quality of these secret techniques was worthless. The rules of the Great Illusionary Realm Dao development stage clearly encouraged the creation of unique cultivation methods and secret art. On the other side, the confrontation between the top nobles of Linzi continued. Faced with Bao Zhongqing's aggressive attitude, Chung Gung-shing only smiled and asked, "You can't raise the price? Are you short on money, young Master Bao?" This intentionally infuriated Bao Zhongqing. Instead calmed down. His eyesight was also very good. He understood that Jiang Wang was stronger than last time. His subordinates would not be able to win. Of course, he did not show any fear on his face. He only said coldly, "It seems that the fight with Wang Yiwu has made you richer than before. You are no longer the empty-handed person who participated in the auction once?" He was poking at Chung Gung-shing's old scar. In the past, Chung Gung-shing had participated in the auction once. When he saw something he liked, he said that he would definitely get it. In the end, he was forced to retreat by someone using Dao origin stones. That incident also became one of the clearest evidence that Chung Gung-shing was not valued. The Bao clan and the Zhonggenjia had been fighting for generations. They both knew how to hurt each other. 400,000 Dao origin stones. Bao Zhongqing shouted. The attendant serving him immediately went to raise the price. The attendant serving Chung Gung-shing glanced at Chung Gung-shing and did not hesitate to raise the price by 1,000 Dao origin stones. There were two types of lifespan increasing treasures. One was able to surpass one's lifespan, and the other was not. The former was naturally much more precious than the latter. It was also much more difficult to find. Everyone had a lifespan. However, because of injuries, exhaustion, and so on, almost no one could live past their lifespan normally. Ordinary lifespan increasing treasures were actually making up for one's lifespan. For example, the year-nourishing pill and longevity fruit that Jiang Wang had taken were all like this. If one's lifespan was short by 10 years, eating a 20-year-old longevity fruit could only make up for that 10 years. It was impossible to surpass one's lifespan. The 7 tassels flower also belonged to this category. Although it was also very precious, the current price was already too high. Occasionally, this kind of thing would happen during auctions. The buyer would lose his temper and not hesitate to spend a lot of money. What they were fighting for was face. They did not care how much the item was worth. What they wanted was the feeling of suppressing their opponent. Now, Bao Zhongqing and Cheng Gengxing seemed to be like this. However, Bao Zhongqing suddenly smiled slyly. "I'll let you have it. Zhenggenjia is rich and powerful. What's wrong with being willing to be a sucker? I'll send someone to the East King Valley to buy it. It won't even cost 200,000 Dao origin stones." He wanted to buy the 7 spike flower in order to win over an elder. There was a limit to the number of 7 spike flowers in the East King Valley every year. Of course, it was not easy to buy. However, there would always be someone willing to pay a premium price. Now, it was more like he was taking advantage of Cheng Gengxing's grudge with him to scam Cheng Gengxing. However, he did not know that the buyer and seller of this 7 spike flower were Cheng Gengxing himself. The amount of Dao origin stones that he had to pay was not much. Only your Bao clan would care about such a small amount of money. If I like it, I'll buy it. It's that simple. Even if the person bidding against me is a dog, I'll still fight for it. Cheng Gengxing's face was calm and indifferent as he said, "Anyway, your carriage company just paid me a large sum of money." With just one sentence, Bao Zhongqing's anger was ignited again. The Bao clan's carriage company had inexplicably paid a large sum of money because of Su Shi's inexplicable madness outside Linzi City. His face became completely gloomy. "It seems like you have a lot of spare energy now?" At this time, the price of 401,000 Dao origin stones had come to an end. The ownership of the 7 spike flower was decided. "You don't have to worry about it." Cheng Gengxing glanced at the water moon mirror. "Is there anything else?" Bao Zhongqing did not say anything else and left in a huff. The people of the 100 Treasures Pavilion quickly tidied up the room and delivered the 7 spike flower. Cheng Gengxing casually handed the 7 spike flower to Jiang Wang, and Jiang Wang pretended to chew it a few times. "How is it?" Cheng Gengxing asked. "It's very effective," Jiang Wang said with satisfaction. "Actually, it wasn't effective at all." "Then let's go." Cheng Gengxing stood up. Ignoring the people of the 100 Treasures Pavilion, the 3 of them left. Someone else would come to hand over the Dao origin stones later. In this way, the process of Jiang Wang's lifespan replenishment was very clear and could withstand anyone's investigation. As long as there were no problems on Tian He's side, Tian Anping should not suspect him. They left the 100 Treasures Pavilion. In the carriage, "What riddle were you playing with Bao Zhongqing just now?" Jiang Wang couldn't help but ask. Cheng Gengxing looked at him with slight surprise. "Even you saw through it?" "Jiang Wang, isn't it a little unfair for me to beat you up now?" Jiang Wang asked. "Ha ha ha ha." Cheng Gengxing was very happy to be mischievous and explained with a smile. He was willing to help me completely clean up Yonggenzuan's business, but the condition was that he wanted a share of the profits. I rejected him. Now that he saw the Jubao merchants collapse, Wang Yiwu turned defensive and wanted to intervene, but it was already too late. Especially in Bao Zhongqing's opinion, Wang Yiwu could still hold on for a long time. But from Cheng Gengxing's point of view, everything was ready except for the east wind. At this time, there was no need to take the risk of bringing in people who wanted to share the profit, especially the Bao family. Jiang Wang thought for a while. You guys secretly formed an alliance? How could that be? With the relationship between the two families, we would be cutting off our own path of retreat if we formed an alliance. It's just a tacit understanding, Cheng Gengxing said lazily. Two people who were on the sidelines in the past have always maintained a tacit understanding. The carriage traveled through the bustling Linzi city. The bustling world kept squeezing into the carriage. But the carriage was very quiet. Too slow, Cheng Gengxing suddenly said. Jiang Wang knew what he was talking about, but he remained silent. Yes, it had dragged on for too long. Yonggenzuan had stayed in Jixiao Academy for too long. Cheng Gengxing handled things well. Until now, he had turned from defense to offense and gained the upper hand. This was all built on the fact that Yonggenzuan could not directly intervene, and no one knew when he would be able to come out. Too slow. At this moment in Shaolianqiao, which was also known as Bai Shi Street, a voice said the same thing. The person who spoke was Zhao Xian. He had a well-groomed beard, and one could see that he was handsome when he was young. He was a doctor from the Ministry of Rites. He had a high position but little power. He was in charge of the officials' funerals. Usually, he was the one who guided officials of different ranks to follow the etiquette during the funerals. Sometimes, he also had to help out. Logically speaking, with his rank 4 official rank, he could leave all the trivial matters to his assistants and subordinate. Officials of his rank did not often do things personally. But he was different. He was very attentive. He would often take care of such trivial matters as the shroud and materials himself. He had been in the Ministry of Rites for so long and had never made a mistake. He had done a lot for Qi. Back then, he was the one who advocated for the Yang country's national defense array to be connected with Qi. This way they could share weal and woe together and achieve long-term stability. Not long after this matter was settled, he moved his family to Qi. At the Ministry of Rites, in terms of official rank and salary, Qi treated him well. But he did not have much real power. Even his subordinates did not listen to him. Most of the time, people from Qi felt superior to people from Yang. Many said that the reason Zhao Xian was so cautious was because he was from the Yang kingdom. Of course, there was no Yang country now. Without Yang country, it meant that he could be a real Qi person now. He could gain more trust from Qi Ting, and have the opportunity to gain real power. For someone like him, who was not even 50 years old, and was in the prime of his life, his cultivation level matched his official rank. Sometimes he just lacked opportunities. Now, many people had started to burn his cold stove again, almost turning the cold stove into a hot stove. But he was still cautious and conscientious. He came to Shaolian Bridge again and personally checked the coffin of the old eunuch who died 2 days ago. This old eunuch did not have much power. When he was alive, he was not sought after. No one cared even more when he was dead. But after all, he had a job. The funeral had its own standard. Sir, it was painted last night. It's just waiting for it to dry. It will be sent over soon. In old Zhang's coffin shop, old Zhang said ingratiatingly. His voice was thin and cold. Even if he was trying to please, it did not make people feel much enthusiasm. Zhao Xian had always been patient, but for some reason, he felt inexplicably uneasy today. Hurry up, he urged. Chapter 528. Tell your workers to hurry up. Why didn't you prepare the coffins in the shop? You still need my lord to rush you. A subordinate with arched eyebrows scolded fiercely. In the past, he would always push Zhao Xian's orders if he could and delay them if he couldn't. In any case, he had already understood this Shangguan's, easy to bully personality. But the situation was different now. Old Zhang apologized profusely. It's really a delicate job. Time is of the essence. I'll be right there, right there. Ever since the fall of the Yang kingdom, there were fewer and fewer people in the Yamen who didn't have eyes. Zhao Xian's rank was not low after all. Now that the problem of trust had been solved, it was only a matter of time before he was promoted. Anyone with eyes could see it clearly. After scolding the coffin shop owner, the subordinate with arched eyebrows said fawningly, "Lord, why don't you go back and rest first? I'll take care of things here. I know what you want. There won't be any problems." Zhao Xian was used to doing things himself, but this time, because of his uneasiness, he subconsciously wanted to agree. "They're coming, they're coming." The coffin shop owner, old Zhang, shouted. Zhao Xian stopped and looked over. From the end of the street, two young men were carrying the coffin and walking over with steady footstep. The coffin itself was covered with a thick cloth and could not easily be seen. Only the rough outline could be seen. Zhao Xian had been to the little link bridge countless times. He was very familiar with everything here. Whose craftsmanship was better, whose goods were worse, who was more generous, how long the shop had been in business. Zhao Xian's gaze casually swept across the coffin shop in front of him. He saw the middle-aged man in the paper figurine shop with his head lowered looking up at him. He seemed to be the nephew of the original shop owner. What was it again? Zhao Xian had some impression of him. Thus, he gave him an amiable and reserved smile. That person also smiled. His smile is quite ugly, Zhao Xian thought. Then, the sky suddenly darkened. It wasn't the sky that darkened. It was the sky within the little link bridge that darkened. Zhao Xian quickly made a judgment based on the strength of the outer building realm. The subordinates who followed him fell to the ground one after another. As they fell to the ground, at the same time, he heard the sound of wind. The wind seemed to come out of a crack and whimpered. He felt cold, extremely cold. His entire body almost began to tremble. The 5 inner palaces rumbled and rotated, and a huge amount of Tao energy surged. At the same time, he called out to his 3 sacred buildings from afar, and he was about to break free from all of this. Then, he saw the middle-aged man who was smiling at him stand up. He stood up, and with just one step, he was already in front of him. His honest face was covered with a mask at some point in time. It was a mask that was as black as ink, with a white door painted on the forehead and words written in blood written on the door. Those 3 words were cold and cruel. They were written, Emperor Song, King Songdi of Hell. Zhao Xian was about to leave when he suddenly realized that his body had stiffened. Who had interfered with his perception? From left, right, front, and back, there was a biting cold killing intent approaching at the same time. Killer move erupted. It was impossible to count how many killing techniques had been unleashed at the same time. 5 people. Zhao Xian only had this thought in his mind before his consciousness sank into the darkness. I'm going to die. Was he going to die? He didn't know why. He let out a long sigh. In the 9th month of the 54th year of the Yuanfeng era of the Qi dynasty, the deputy chief of Hingyang of the former Yang country, who handled the affairs of the capital city on behalf of the Yang emperor, an outer building cultivator and the current minister of rights of the Qi dynasty, Zhao Xian, was assassinated at the Little Lianqiao. He only left this world with a long sigh. The carriage was still on the way back to the residence, and the 3 of them had already sensed the commotion in the crowd. Jiang Wang lifted the curtain on the left and saw figures flying in the sky. Linzi was the capital city of the Qi dynasty. Under normal circumstances, only the official forces were allowed to fly. Among the people flying in the sky, there were armored warriors and constables in standard black clothes. Something had happened. This was the first thought that came to Jiang Wang's mind. Such a huge commotion rarely occurred in Linzi. At least, it was the first time he had seen such a scene since he came to Linzi. he immediately thought of the doorless hell. Chung Gung-shing looked out from the window on the other side of the carriage and muttered to himself, "The Imperial Guards and the Northern Yamen have been mobilized." Suddenly, he caught on to something. The commandant of the Northern Yamen, Jing Shi, is personally going out. He became excited and pulled back his head. He lifted the curtain and ordered, "Quickly find out what happened." The carriage driver didn't say anything. He let go of the reins and dived into the crowd. Chung Gung-shing personally held the reins and shook the carriage, returned to the residence. In fact, he was so anxious that he didn't even want the carriage. But the closer it was to this moment, the more cautious he had to be. It was best to maintain a normal state of shock and vigilance. The target of the hell was actually the Minister of Rights, Zhao Xian. Depending on the level of the situation, the official forces in Linzi City had different reaction times. When it involved extraordinary power, as long as the target was clear, the Northern Yamen could project the corresponding extraordinary power to any location in Linzi City except the Imperial Palace. Zhao Xian was a fourth-rank official. The intensity of the battle involved in the attack on an official of this rank and strength could trigger a very high-level response from Linzi. The moment the battle at the little bridge broke out, it was sensed. After receiving the alarm, the commandant of the Northern Yamen, Zheng Shi, personally went out. He arrived at the little bridge in less than 20 breaths of time. But what he didn't expect was that Zhao Xian, a dignified outer building expert, couldn't even last 3 breaths. Beside his corpse was the imprint of the Hell's Door, a white door. Zheng Shi quickly made a judgment. There were at least 5 Yama from the Hell's Door at the scene. In other words, there were at least 5 outer building assassins in Linzi. He immediately ordered the 5 closest city gates to be sealed. As the commandant of the Northern Yamen, he only had the authority to close 5 of Linzi's 108 city gates at the same time. Zheng Shi was very clear that only by immediately closing the Great Formation, sealing off the entire city, and inviting a high-level power to suppress the situation could they guarantee that the damage caused by 5 outer building experts would be minimized. However, closing the Great Formation and sealing off the entire city required the approval of at least one minister. The commandant of the Northern Yamen did not have this authority. He quickly applied for an order from the Political Affairs Hall. The right minister on duty also approved it as quickly as possible. But the precious 20 breaths of time had already passed. The assassins from the Hell's Door fled without a trace. For this assassination, the Hell's Door sent out more than 5 Yama. They surrounded and killed Zhao Xian in 3 breaths of time, and then fled Linzi in less than 10 breaths of time. The meticulousness of the plan, the precision of the timing, and the swiftness of the action shocked the world. If the Hell's Door was famous in the eastern region for killing the Chu Kingdom's border general, then this operation in the Qi capital undoubtedly made the Hell's Door famous throughout the world. The Great Qi was not something a small country like the Chu Kingdom could compare to. It was one of the world's overlords. But in this incident, it had lost all face. The location of the incident was the Little Bridge, the famous White Matter Street of Linzi. However, the location was relatively remote. This was one of the reasons why the response was not timely enough. The most important reason was that nothing had happened in Linzi for a long time. People had almost ignored this possibility. There were many strong men in this huge city who could kill a few assassins. But when something happened, the first thing they thought of was the Imperial Palace. Top-level strong men guarded all the important places and could not be easily moved. They were afraid of creating a diversion. By the time the northern government communicated with the Political Affairs Hall and arranged for the defense to be transferred, the assassins had already fled. Linzi's response was already very fast. Zheng Shi even skipped many steps and directly communicated with the right minister. However, when it involved strong men of the divine realm or higher, a slight move in one part would affect the whole situation. This was also one of the reasons why Chongxian and Chu Liang did not agree to go out of the city to deal with Su Shi. The Hell's Door was well prepared. After one successful strike, he immediately fled. The northern government commandant Zheng Shi initially determined that this case was the revenge of the remnants of the Yang court. He submitted a letter of apology to the Qi emperor and resigned from the position of northern government commandant. The Qi emperor did not allow him to redeem himself. He was in charge of capturing and killing the assassins from the Hell's Door and the remnants of the Yang court behind the assassins. The words "at all costs" were rarely used. This gave Zheng Shi a lot of trust and power. In the vast eastern region, the storm had arrived. Chapter 529. The location of the incident was Shaolianqiao, and the victim was Zhao Xian, a doctor from the Ministry of Rites. Of course, the most important point was that the murderer was someone from the doorless hell. This also meant that the opportunity Cheng Gongxing had been waiting for all these days had finally arrived. Of course, he wouldn't do anything. He just needed to wait. Upon hearing the name of Shaolianqiao, Jiang Wang instantly thought of the plain-looking man in the paper figurine shop. When Su Xiangqian helped with Su Fang's funeral, he had followed him to Shaolianqiao. At that time, he felt that the man in the paper figurine shop didn't seem like someone who did such a small business. However, he didn't want to complicate matters, so he didn't pay attention to it. Now that he thought about it, if he had paid attention back then, he would have been courting death. That was Yama from the Doorless Hell, an outer building expert. And Su Xiangqian even wanted to buy on credit, and on credit again and again. Now that he thought about it, he was truly horrified. As for Zhao Xian's death, Jiang Wang didn't have much of an opinion. This kind of traitor didn't win much sympathy. However, he was now a Qi official. His death in Linzi was a fierce slap to the Qi court's face. The Baya government was even trampled into the abyss. After this matter, whether or not he could keep his current power and responsibility was another matter. The Baya commandant, Zheng Shi, must have gone crazy by now. He was young and powerful, and his methods were superb. He had managed Linzi's security very well. He was also at the peak of the outer building and had the potential to become a god. His future was limitless. If he went one step further, whether he was squeezed into the political affairs hall or sent to the army, he would have very good prospects. Now that this matter had blown up, it was already the Qi Emperor's mercy that he could keep his current position. It was impossible for him to be promoted in the next 8 to 10 years. Even if everyone knew that with the Doorless Hell's combat power, mobility, and precise timing, it would be difficult for anyone else to effectively deal with it in the Baya commandant's position. This was the upper limit of the Baya government. It was responsible for Linzi's security, but it didn't have the power to mobilize the top fighters. The outer building level was basically the limit of the Baya government's ability to handle matters. But knowing was one thing, someone had to take responsibility. Since Zheng Shi was in this position, there was no shirking his responsibility. It was said that Zheng Shi was at Shaolianqiao, and he personally reviewed the entire assassination operation. Afterwards, he searched the entire city and captured many people to bring to Baya. Shaolianqiao was almost completely emptied, and he did not give anyone face. At this juncture, no one dared to provoke him. Judging from the strength of the Gateless Hell, Yin Guan probably didn't need Jiang Wang's channel to enter Linzi. Perhaps he had other intentions when he made the request to Jiang Wang. However, this was a story for another day. Emperor Song was hiding in the paper figurine shop. It was said that the owner of the paper figurine shop had returned to his hometown to recuperate. There was no trace of him at all. He had vanished from the face of the earth. However, the Shaolianqiao patrolling soldier, who had turned a blind eye to this matter, suddenly fell ill and died in his home. Very quickly, it was discovered that the deputy patrol officer behind him had killed him in order to cover up the truth. This deputy inspector was also bribed by the shopkeeper of a small restaurant. In short, it was a pile of bad debts. Jing Shi's ability was absolutely superb. In an extremely short period of time, he was able to reconstruct the entire process of the members of Dorless Hell sneaking into Linzi. Among them, there was naturally King Qingguang and King Coroner, who had entered the city last. The person who was in charge of this matter was the owner of a cloth shop. He had some connections with the city gate guards, but most importantly, he was one of Yung Genzuan's men. Of course, before the Baya government could investigate him, he had already disappeared. A day later, his body was found in a sewage canal in a nearby street. From the surface, it seemed that he had fallen into the sewage canal and drowned after being drunk. However, everyone knew that he had been killed to silence him. Chung Gungxing did a much better job than the deputy patrol officer. From beginning to end, he didn't even have a trace of blood on him. Chung Gungxing was very considerate to cut off all clues, so that the Baya government couldn't trace it back to Yung Genzuan. The Baya government also didn't find any relevant clues. However, this person was indeed one of Yung Genzuan's men, so naturally, he attracted the Baya government's attention for Yung Genzuan. The more they couldn't find anything, the more suspicious they were. No one suspected that Yung Genzuan, who was in Jixia Academy, would be disloyal to Qi. However, it was an indisputable fact that he was not strict with his subordinates. There was also conclusive evidence that his subordinates had helped the remnants of Yang Court assassinate Qi. After leaving Marquis Boing's residence, Chung Gungxing looked up at the sky. It was very bright. Jiang Wang went over and asked, "How was it?" Today was Zhenggenjia's core meeting. Chongxian, Chu Liang and Chongxian, Mingguang were all present. Even Chung Gungxing's fourth uncle, Chongxian, Mingyi, who was far away on the island, had sent a representative. It was obvious what they were going to discuss. Of course, Jiang Wang and Shi Si couldn't participate in this meeting. They could only wait for the results. However, they were all waiting outside Marquis Boing's residence to show their support for Chung Gungxing. Chung Gungxing looked at him and then at Shi Si. Suddenly, he smiled. Everything is under control. Yung Genzuan was still in Jixia Academy, but his businesses had been dismembered. Although Wang Yiwu was in charge, this part of the business belonged to Zhenggenjia. Even Wang Yiwu couldn't stop Zhenggenjia from taking back power, unless Yung Genzuan personally stepped in and used his influence in the family to turn the situation around. However, this was a paradox. He was in Jixia Academy and couldn't come out at all. He also didn't know what was happening outside. Until today, Chung Gungxing could finally say that his goal of sending Yung Genzuan to Jixia Academy had been achieved. Don't those elders support Zhongxian Zun from the bottom of their hearts? Why did they give up so easily this time? In the Sunset Mountain Villa, Jiang Wang asked for details. Chung Gungxing sneered. The family's interests are above all. Back then, they even gave up on him. What's wrong with giving up on Yung Genzuan today? The him in this sentence could only be Chung Gungxing's biological father, Chongxian Fu Tuesday. The nature is different. Jiang Wang shook his head. Yung Genzuan's situation isn't that dangerous. Therefore, the family wasn't so decisive in giving up on him. Now, they only took back his businesses and didn't remove his inheritance rights. He's still the strongest contender for the family head position. He's second only to you, Jiang Wang added. Chung Gungxing smiled proudly. He's second only to me. It was only today that he gained the upper hand in his competition with Yung Genzuan for the first time. In terms of cultivation talent, he wasn't as good as Yung Genzuan. However, in terms of business, he had officially left Yung Genzuan behind. Who could lead the Zhenggenjia to a brighter future? From now on, Chung Gungxing would receive more support. How is his business divided? Jiang Wang asked again. Uncle Mingguang will take a portion. After all, it's his son's business. Moreover, I'm very relieved that it's in his hands. As for the rest, the elders will take a portion, and I'll take a portion. Fourth uncle didn't help Yonggenzuan, but he didn't take his business either. Maintain a neutral position, Jiang Wang muttered. Chung Gungxing said, originally, I could have taken more. I could have taken the lion's share. Because Uncle Chu Liang and I led the Battle of Qiyang, we're the least likely people in the entire Zhanggenjia to be in cahoots with the remnants of Yang Court. If we want to completely get rid of the influence of this matter, and let everyone in Qiyang rest assured, we have to take over. Jiang Wang could completely understand why he loosened his grip and allowed the benefits to leak out. Those elders took Yonggenzuan's business, so they have to be wary of Yonggenzuan's resentment. How can they support him wholeheartedly in the future? Chung Gungxing laughed. He had never felt so carefree before. Chapter 530. The Grand Marshal's Residence. When Lianmu was no longer playing chess, he sat cross-legged in front of the chess table and looked out the window. He didn't want to admit that his game had already been decided, but he had to face it. Wang Yiwu, who was sitting across from him, was still cultivating with his eyes closed. Under the calmness, the surging qi of energy and blood made him sigh more than once. In terms of cultivation talent, Wang Yiwu was indeed the most terrifying person he had ever met. He also had abnormal self-discipline and hard work. He was never satisfied with his strength. Sometimes, when Lianmu had to admire him, he knew very well how much importance Wang Yiwu attached to the matter that Zhong Xian Zun had handed over to him. Not to mention anything else, just catching him from the army alone had cost who knows how many favors. However, in the face of the sudden deterioration of the situation, even he was upset. Wang Yiwu was still calmly completing his daily cultivation. Looking down at the large dragon on the chessboard that was about to be slaughtered, he suddenly wanted to reach out and mess up the game. However, with his wisdom, he knew that it was meaningless. How did this game of chess come to this point? At that time, after he used a fake news to lure Jiang Wang away, he cut off Chung Gungxing's arm and immediately launched an all-out attack. Jiang Wang was not only Chung Gungxing's most trusted person, but his strength and reputation were enough to help Chung Gungxing deal with many things that Chung Gungxing couldn't take care of. Now that he was gone, Chung Gungxing couldn't find anyone who could take charge and be absolutely reliable. 14th Prince's status meant that he couldn't take charge of the overall situation, and he wasn't good at it. Chongxian Chuliang was Chung Gungxing and Yonggenzuan's uncle, so he couldn't directly intervene. When Jiang Wang left, Chung Gungxing was indeed a bit tired and had a hard time resisting. When the situation was good, the Jiubao merchants suddenly collapsed. In one night, hundreds of shops were closed and countless properties were sold off. He had long predicted the collapse of the Jiubao merchants, and he had also secretly added fuel to the fire. As an ally, he would naturally be able to eat the fattest meat during the collapse of Jiubao merchants. He was invited to take charge of the business left behind by Yonggenzuan. He was not satisfied with just defeating Chung Gungxing. Instead, he wanted to make this power bigger so that he could show off his abilities. It also helped him gain enough capital for this trip to Linzi. However, the collapse of the Jiubao merchants was too sudden. It happened much earlier than expected. When a landslide occurred, a chain reaction was unavoidable. Jiubao merchants collapsed too quickly. Even its nominal ally, Yonggenzuan, who was now represented by Wang Yiwu, was affected, and it was in a mess. When Lianmu stabilized the situation immediately with his superb skills. However, he did not expect Su Shi to make such a stupid decision. When the Chamber of Commerce was in such a difficult situation, Su Shi actually gave up on resisting the external forces and turned around to stab him and Wang Yiwu. He directly cut off all the cooperation with Yung Genzuan and broke all the contracts that would cause both sides to suffer losses. Su Shi was so impulsive. As an undeniably smart person, he should be able to see the big picture. He should try his best to unite with his allies and struggle for survival. How could he turn against them just because they took a few bites of meat? Even if he was crazy, he should know his priorities and go after Cheng Gengxing first. When Lianmu was good at manipulating people's minds, and he also consciously pushed Su Shi in that direction. However, Su Shi was probably driven crazy and broke down. His stupid choice shocked him again and again. After stabbing his ally and making him and Wang Yiwu panic for a while, Su Shi finally gave up. Instead of struggling with the Jubao merchants, he ran out of Linzi City alone to ambush Jiang Wang. He wanted to assassinate Jiang Wang and did such a reckless thing. Even so, when Lianmu still tried his best to cooperate, he immediately asked Wang Yiwu to activate the backup plan left by Yung Genzuan and use Yung Genzuan's influence in Zhanggenjia to stop Cheng Gengxing from using the power of God Descendant. He forced Cheng Gengxing to lose blood in Su Shi's madness. Maybe only one Jiang Wang would die, or maybe more would die. Jiang Wang could survive in such a situation and kill Su Shi. It was indeed beyond his expectations. Su Shi's strength was probably not as strong as he thought. That was fine. It was just another round of attack and defense, when Lianmu was not afraid of a battle. However, the sudden assassination in Linzi City by the door to hell and the sudden involvement of Zhong Xianzun's subordinates in the revenge of the remnants of Yang Court caught him completely off guard. When it rains, it pours. Bea was in charge of this matter. With Zheng Shangming's matter before, Bea Commandant Zheng Shi did not give the marshal's office any face. It was already good enough that he did not personally frame them. There was no reason for him to help them clear their names. Now that he had the emperor's orders, he seemed to be chasing them relentlessly. What was even more difficult was that this was Yung Genzuan's matter. Although he had given Wang Yiwu the responsibility, Wang Yiwu had no way of using the power of the marshal's office to support him. Similarly, when Lianmu had no reason to use the power of the army. On the official level, Yung Genzuan's power could only rely on the connections left behind by Yung Genzuan. In the end, Yung Genzuan was trapped in Jixia Academy, which meant that they had to fight Cheng Gengxing with one hand. Otherwise, why would they say that Cheng Gengxing's move was a stroke of genius? Because of this congenital deficiency, when Lianmu chose to pursue and attack Zhong Xianxing as soon as he was invited over by Wang Yiwu, he wanted to attack Zhong Xianxing like a storm, so that Zhong Xianxing would have no time to defend himself. He wanted to use attacks to protect his vitals. However, Cheng Gengxing withstood it and saw through his trap several times. He forced him to use an open scheme to lure away Jiang Wang and then use his strength to fight him head-on. This was the choice that he had come up with the greatest chance of success after careful consideration. However, he still did not succeed. Even today, he could already be declared a failure. Because it involved the remnants of Yang Court, Zhanggenjia also gave up on supporting Yung Genzuan's power and took back a large number of family businesses. Only a few of Yung Genzuan's personal businesses were still struggling at death's door. In the face of Cheng Gengxing's anticipated fierce attacks, when Lianmu found it hard to say that he could withstand it. There was always a winner and a loser in a chess game. When Lianmu comforted himself like this, "What are you thinking about?" Wang Yiwu had unknowingly ended his cultivation. "What else can I be thinking about?" When Lianmu smiled bitterly. "I'm thinking about how Yung Genzuan's men got involved with the remnants of Yang Court. Could it be that he wanted to hinder Chongshuan's attack on Yang Court? Why would he be so unwise to act now? I'm thinking about how Yung Genzuan won the title of Most Outstanding Peer. Why would Zhanggenjia give up just like that? I'm thinking about too many things, and I actually don't understand. Wang Yiwu was silent for a while. Azun has nothing to do with the remnants of Yang Court. Before the Battle of Chiang, he didn't think that fatty could really be a threat to him. As for giving up, with his talent, as long as Zheng Genjia isn't a fool, he wouldn't give up on him. It's nothing more than those old fellows taking the opportunity to beat him up. If you can confirm that Yong Genzuan has nothing to do with this matter, then you'll be able to confirm it. Then, based on the results, this matter must have been set up by Chung Gengsheng. However, he did it perfectly. I can't find any clues in a short time, and Bea definitely won't cooperate with us. Now that things have come to this, we can only let Yong Genzuan come out and find a way to prove his innocence. At this point, Wen Lianmu shook his head bitterly. Look at what I'm saying. I've really lost my head. In order to shove Yong Genzuan into Jixia Academy, Chung Gengsheng had almost bet the entire Battle of Chiang. If Yong Genzuan could come out so easily, why would Wen Lianmu need to think of a way here? Wang Yiwu didn't show any signs of defeat. He asked, "Is there no good news at all?" "There's only worse," Wen Lianmu said tiredly. Not only is Chung Gengsheng attacking those businesses, but the Tian family from Days is also interfering. Didn't you give Tian Huanzhang the benefits that you promised him? Or is he just greedy? Neither. Wen Lianmu shook his head bitterly. Do you think that I want to take all the benefits and do everything to the extreme? Angering Zheng Shi and offending Bao Zhongqing were all choices made after weighing the pros and cons. Although I failed, it was still acceptable. As for attacking the Jubao merchants, I wanted to gain more capital and resources to suppress Chung Gengsheng. Su Shi's sudden madness caught me off guard. How can I use Tian Huanzhang for nothing? He sighed. It's Tian Anping. No one knows why he went crazy. Maybe it's because we contacted Tian Huanzhang? Wang Yiwu didn't know what to say about Tian Anping, who was known as a lunatic. Anyway, it's come to this, Wen Lianmu said. What else can I say? Wang Yiwu shrugged. Azun trusted me, but I messed things up. He pointed at his chest. It doesn't feel good here. I'm sorry, Wen Lianmu said. I made a lot of mistakes. Actually, it was all because he was in a hurry to attack. After his attacks were neutralized, he naturally made mistakes. However, Wen Lianmu wouldn't comfort himself with this. Wang Yiwu waved his hand to stop him from continuing to blame himself. I'm the one who asked for your help. I still have this bit of responsibility. Then, he asked again, is there really no other way? Perhaps, Wen Lianmu said. You can ask military advisor Chen for advice. Or perhaps you can ask military god. The military advisor Chen he mentioned was Jiang Mingxiong's eldest disciple, Chen Ziqing. Jiang Mingxiong was De Qi's military god. People said that Chen Ziqing inherited his strategy and Wang Yiwu inherited his military skills. Wang Yiwu shook his head. Master won't help me if it's related to Azun. As for senior brother Chen, he's a talented strategist. His strategy isn't suited for this kind of thing. Even though he was very depressed, Wen Lianmu couldn't help but roll his eyes. You really don't know how to talk. So my strategy is only suited for this kind of thing? However, he wasn't in the mood to bicker. He just grabbed a chess piece and threw it on the chessboard. Wang Yiwu understood that it was time for this game to end. Chapter 531. That day they were also in a study, sitting on both sides of the chessboard. The soft couch was next to the windows, and the windows were all open. The smell of the wind, the smell of the flowers, and the smell of the earth. However, while he was sitting upright and still, he was supporting his head with his hand and leaning back lazily. Why don't we just forget about it? Wang Yiwu remembered that he had said this before. Huh. He raised his eyelids and smiled faintly. He was always like this, as if there were no people or things that could truly interest him. I say, why don't we just forget about it? He finally became a little more serious. His right hand supported himself on the couch and he sat up. His sitting posture was still not very proper. One leg was crossed, the other was propped up, and his left hand was resting on his knee. He tilted his head slightly and looked over just like that. He didn't say anything, but his pitch-black eyes were clearly asking, "What stupid thing are you saying? We've each walked to where we are today, and we're not only carrying ourselves. You can't let go of Jungenjia, and I can't leave the Tianqiu army either." He smiled. His smile was like a pear tree blooming. It was truly an unforgettable, beautiful scene. When I was 7 years old, they told me that every blade of grass and every tree in Jungenjia would be mine in the future. I've never doubted this, and I've made everyone who doubted me no longer doubt it. Therefore, I naturally can't let go of Jungenjia, he said. But why should I let go of Jungenjia, and why should you leave the Tianqiu army? We don't have a choice. Isn't that right? Remember. He raised a finger and tapped twice in the air. That's a choice given to you by others. It's not your choice. Yonggenzuan, the power of history is stronger than you think. I have the confidence to defeat any opponent, but I don't know how to wave my fist at history. Besides, that's my master. Yes, he's De Qi's military god. He's invincible. I respect him very much. I also respect my grandfather very much. But he's him, you're you, they're them, and we're us. Is this their era? Perhaps it is. But our era has already begun. That's true. But… No buts, he interrupted. I want Jungenjia too. He sat up straight and looked over. I want everything I want. When Lianmu had already returned to the army. He could no longer help here, so there was no point in staying any longer. Wang Yiwu sat alone in front of the go-board. He didn't have many friends. He felt bad for dragging his friend to Linzi, but when Lianmu left, he didn't say anything. He was not a person who would say nice things. On the chessboard in front of him, the upper left corner was a mess. When Lianmu admitted defeat and threw a chess piece into the mess. However, the rest of the chessboard was still very clear. Wang Yiwu's gaze fell on the right side plate. In the battle between the great dragons, the black pieces had already blocked their last breath and slaughtered the great dragons, but they had yet to take away the slaughtered white pieces. There was a long silence. Wang Yiwu stretched out his bony fingers and picked them up one by one. Xia Mountain Villa. Jiang Wang sat cross-legged on his bed and sorted out his cultivation. He was different from those Tianjiao with prominent family backgrounds. For example, Lei Zhanqian had the 9 Heavens Thunder Amplification Technique, and Jiang Wuxia had the Supreme Crepe Myrtle Middle Heaven Manual. They were all-encompassing and straightforward mantras. Not long after he entered the Taoist Academy, Maplewood City was destroyed. He naturally had no chance to learn the Purple Illusory Taishang Sutra, the foundation of Mount Yujing's cultivation. If he wanted to learn the Purple Illusory Taishang Sutra, he had to enter the Prefectural Tao Academy and then the National Tao Academy. He had to stand out from the National Tao Academy and go to Mount Yujing to study. Only after winning the competition at Mount Yujing could he have the possibility to learn the Purple Illusory Taishang Sutra. As for Jiang Wang, he had only learned a basic breathing technique and some Tao techniques in the Tao College. But it had to be said that his time in the Tao Academy in Maplewood City laid a solid foundation for his Tao cultivation. He learned a lot of things, such as the East Rising Purple Qi Sword Mantra, the 4 Spirits Body Refinement Mantra. Most of them were obtained through the Great Illusionary Land. He learned everything. No matter how close Chung Gung Xing was to him, he could not pass on the Jungenjia's foundational mantras to him. The foundational mantras of the great powers were often systematic. They were not like the 4 Spirits Body Refinement Mantra that Jiang Wang cultivated, which was only focused on one point. Usually, it included how to build the formation points and complete the foundation, how to build the minor heavenly cycle and the major heavenly cycle, how to open the gate of heaven and earth. They were all of the same origin. How to fight, as well as the most suitable Tao techniques and battle tactics for this system. Cultivators would naturally not be too bad if they followed the prescribed order. But these foundational mantras did not have much meaning to Jiang Wang now. He had gotten his hands on some, but they were only for reference. He had stumbled his way to where he was today, and he had slowly found his own path. To be honest, he did not even care for mantras that could directly cultivate to the outer building realm. Along the way of cultivation, although he did not have any master to give him advice, nor did he have any top-notch mantras that could be followed step by step, every step he took in each realm could be considered stable. He had asked Chongxian and Chu Liang for guidance, and he often discussed cultivation matters with Cheng Gengxing, including Xiang Qian, Zhu Biqiong, and even Su Xiangqian and Li Longchuan after he came to Linzi. There was no need to mention Chongxian and Chu Liang. Just a few words from them had benefited him greatly. As for the peers he had made friends with, they either had top-notch inheritances or came from famous sections. Their horizons were all extraordinary. It could be said that Jiang Wang had freeloaded his horizons and relied on unorthodox methods to reach where he was today. Thinking back on the journey, he had perfectly opened his meridians with the meridian unlocking pill left behind by Zhuo Guanglia and obtained an incomparably vast heavenly palace. It could be said to be perfect. He had used the heavenly cycle star formation derived from the Tao development platform to lay the foundation and reached the meridian wandering realm. It could be said to be perfect. He had used the sun, moon, and stars to reach the heavenly cycle realm. The three lights of the sun, moon, and stars were grand and imposing, and their concepts were naturally extraordinary. They might not necessarily lose to anyone. He had used the heavenly cycle realm of heaven, earth, and man to reach the heavenly cycle realm. The heaven of heaven, earth, and man perfectly covered the sun, moon, and stars. It could be said that they were of the same origin. His heavenly cycle realm and major heavenly cycle realm were formed from his own experience and comprehension. It was grand and complete enough. The heaven, earth, and man sword techniques that he had created were naturally formed after he had completed them. He had explored the limits of this realm in the heavenly cycle realm, and had been forced to open the heaven and earth door in advance outside Qingyang town due to circumstances. However, there was no need to doubt his strength. After opening the heaven and earth door, he had obtained a worldly isolated island that far surpassed the size of ordinary cultivators. This worldly isolated island had also been revitalized by the world origin of the forest ocean origin world. It could be said that the foundation of the soaring dragon realm was sufficient. As for the divine ability that represented the highest achievement of the inner mansion realm, everyone could only rely on themselves. No technique could save them. Since Jiang Wang had won the heavenly palace mystic realm, the divine ability seed had already been reserved. The outer mansion realm also had a top-notch 7-star sacred pavilion secret technique waiting ahead. If Jiang Wang could summarize his cultivation process into a practical and replicable cultivation method, it could be considered a fairly outstanding technique. Of course, this was something that he was still far from being able to do. But then again, if the purple void profound scripture of the highest supreme were to fall from the sky, he still wouldn't reject it. That was a supreme Taoist scripture that led directly to the pinnacle. After ending his cultivation for the day, he fought another battle in the Great Void Fantasy realm to solidify his title as the number 1 soaring dragon of the Great Void. Only then did Jiang Wang leave the room. He walked around and didn't see Cheng Gengxing and 14, so he casually asked a maidservant. The maidservant replied, "Young Master Cheng Gengxing personally went to take over the shop. It seems to be at the eastern entrance. Jiang Wang knew that this was probably the last shop under Yung Genzuan's control. Chung Gongxing had been suppressed for so many years. At the final juncture, it was inevitable that he would personally witness it. It just so happened that he wanted to go out and relax. Thus he smiled. I'll go take a look. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.